Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the DomJake podcast. My name is Jake.
And my name is Dom.
Now, this is going to be a different one where we'll kind of dive into a little bit of a taboo subject. Do you know what that subject could be, Dom?
Hmm. I might know what it is behind the scenes, but for the purpose of the video or the podcast, I will let you talk about this.
Sure thing. Wink, wink. By the way, everyone who already is listening to this has seen the title and the thumbnail, so they probably could piece it together a little bit. But if you're only listening, well, we're getting political here.
And before anybody starts waving their hands around, this is by no means us persuading anybody's opinions. More so just educating you guys.
Exactly. We're pretty much just doing a little bit of history lesson. We're talking about like modern stuff, but in no way are we saying, hey, let's start a revolution and have everyone vote, I don't know,
What?
Arnold Schwarzenegger in. Let's all write him in because we all, I don't know. We're not doing a campaign like that. We're just talking political.
Vote for Kanye. No.
Vote for Kanye 2025.
There we go. Yeah, but no. All jokes aside,
All
we
jokes
have
aside.
but so we had the task of researching different eras, whether that's mainly just campaigns to different colonizations, you name it.
And not to mention, we're also going to be talking about, the starts of democracy, how it could have began with the past, and we're going to be talking about, the modern day stuff too. And so strap in, buckle in. I guess we're set to start, unless if you have any last minute thoughts.
Hmm. Is this gonna bring you down memory lane from back in history class? Or
Could it could be, maybe.
actually, better question, did the task of researching bring you back to your school days?
uh, let's begin. Okay,
Anyways, let's go.
but yeah, we're definitely gonna go over quite a lot of things. So I guess let's take it from the beginning. Let's start with the ancient political systems. Now, some of the earliest political systems came from civilizations like Greece, like Rome, Athens, over in Greece, is often credited with pioneering democracy, where citizens, well, at least male citizens in this case, had a direct say in governance. Back then, of course, it was kind of known by a lot of people that women and children were kind of, let's just face it, labeled as property in the olden days. So they could not have a say in any of the governance. Of course, in modern day, that has changed for the better, where people actually have a say, but back then, it wasn't the case.
Yep, I do think people have a right to vote.
Yeah, it's definitely right. Yeah. And then there's also the Roman Republic, which I mentioned a little bit before. That had a little bit more of a complex system with elected officials like consuls and senators. Senators is actually a term we use today. While not exactly democratic by today's standards, it did lay a little bit of the groundwork for modern representative governance. Now, it's kind of, if we're going to put it this way, it's almost like student council stuff or whatever, right? Where it's like a student council is usually typically approved by the students, right? and it was like the students for the students. Usually the staff didn't have a lot of say, but they did have like a staff member as an advisor. That's more or less what's kind of happening with uh, the Roman Republic. It's not something where it's like anybody could just join. It's almost a mixture between like a monarchy and today's democracy. Like it had little stems from here, little stems from there, but that's what the Roman Republic was kind of like.
It just takes me back to, I guess, 6th grade, when we did learn about Rome, Greece, and Egypt.
Hmm. Now, it is interesting you said Egypt. They didn't really have that type of, let's call it governance, right? They were more so like a kingdom almost, right? Except they used pharaohs instead of kings, but it's essentially the same thing, right? Um, the pharaoh was just born into a popular family, a rich family, or maybe a youthful looking one, or maybe the strongest warrior or whatever, but like they were typically rich king royalty type of people, right? Um, they weren't elected in; they were just born in most cases, um, which kind of counteracts the idea of a democracy. Which, well, wouldn't you say, right? That's not the same thing, right?
Not really, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like a monarch, just maybe rephrased a little bit, because I think there were more pharaohs at one point than a king, right? I think if anything, it's like almost like rich mayors, right? It's like one state can have many different mayors. It's just, which one's the ruler of that area. That's what I'm kind of remembering Egypt to be. I didn't research Egypt for today's recording, so I'm just going off of memory here,
Hmm.
which
How's that?
memory is flawed sometimes.
Yeah. Or you may remember something that's not exactly what you remember.
True. So here's some plausible deniability. If I got any of this wrong, that's because I didn't research it today. But let's move on a little bit to the nice rising sun country. That's right, we're talking about China here, or at least
Hmm.
ancient China. Now, China had dynasties which were ruled under the mandate of heaven, a concept that political power was given by divine approval. This would kind of be like the church or the temple would say, okay, you could rule this nation because God told me that you are able to rule this nation. That's pretty much a little bit of what happened. Now, of course, modern day, we're not always looking for, religion as the reason why somebody's in power, but it definitely existed in different areas. Now, these systems each influence governance in their own regions, but they also laid the foundation for modern political theories and systems worldwide. Of course, the church isn't always picking a leader today, but some of the systems that they did things back in China, they kind of match alongside what we're doing today in the sense that anybody was essentially able to become a ruler. Of course, back then in ancient China, they were more so focused on, okay, God told me you're able to rule. So, I mean, anybody could as long as God approved them, right?
Yeah.
Even if it was a peasant or even if it was a wealthy landowner. As long as the church approved you, you were set. And that Chinese church or that Chinese temple mindset is kind of like what modern thing in the United States, Dom?
What's it?
What's comparable?
United States?
Yes, what's similar to that temple theory in
Mm,
modern day US?
shit.
It's comparable to the Electoral College, where it's a group of individuals in the church. However, of course, the Electoral College probably isn't in a church in US, but a group of individuals was saying, yes, God told me this, so yes, we'll elect this person.
Like
That's what I was looking for.
the Electoral College, then,
I was looking for Electoral College,
which still is a thing today.
which,
Judicial.
well, the Electoral College didn't exist in the Chinese in China, in ancient Chinese political systems. I'm just saying the temple, the church goers, the priests dictating who was able to do it based off of who they thought was right.
Yeah.
That's kind of the comparison I was trying to say. Um,
Yeah.
Now, traveling a little bit to a different continent, let's talk about Europe a little bit. Now, if we're going to fast forward to medieval Europe, we will eventually get to the feudal system. It's a little bit of a shift from the direct involvement ancient demo seen in ancient democracies. Feudalism was a hierarchical system where land was exchanged for services. Now, land, you know,
Yeah.
land is always the hot commodity, especially back in the day. If you were able to rule over these vast hills, you were someone, right? If you owned property, you were somebody.
Mm.
That lasted for a long time because Europe eventually became USA. Kind of.
Which,
Almost.
at least,
Yes.
at least on the New England side, right?
I mean, but honestly, for the most part, even like, traveling west, that mindset kind of happened where, like, the property owners, the men, the rich people, they were more so the ones who had the say. But regardless, at the top of the feudalism system, you had the king. But the real power trickled down to the lords who controlled the large estates. In exchange for land, vassals, often knights, swore loyalty to the lords and provided military service. So it's a trade almost. It's I get to have this wealth and this power if I could, serve the Lord, be a knight for the kingdom, right? It's trades and goods, it's trading goods for services and whatnot.
Mm.
That's more economy based, if anything, but I mean, feudalism was definitely a political ruling too.
Yep. Oh,
Um,
yeah. This whole king and queen thing.
mm,
I mean, that's kind of, I'm guessing, their version of like how we have presidents.
well, the king, because honestly, even in modern day, you had the late Queen Elizabeth, the now King Charles, right?
King Charles
Y-
III, I think.
Charles, I think, yeah. Um, I did research that, but you still do have kings and queens. It's just in Europe anyway, in Great Britain, whatever you want to call it, it is more of a figurehead. that is not really the person who, or should I say, the people who actually govern the nation. Now, it isn't to say that they don't govern part of it, because you would, if you know a little bit about modern European kingdomship, you would know that some of the, actually all of the current royal family also have dukedoms and duchess that like names. That's why you'll see like King Charles, Duke of whatever part of Great Britain, right? Um, he would have land and kind of would be able to dictate a little bit. However, we've kind of moved on from that almost, because I think there's also mayors and stuff in Britain and England too, right? But regardless, we're talking about the past with, you know, kings and knights and queens and servants, right?
Knight in shining armor.
Now, we have the trickle down service, right? The trickle down economics, kind of. But we had, the king at the top, the lords in the middle, the knights, the working class, then pretty much the peasants. And then below the peasants are also slaves.
Hmm.
That happened. It's not a good thing in any of history, but it happened. Um, Now, the peasants, or serfs, were at the bottom, working the land in return for protection. That would be people, who were humble farmers, who would build the houses, who would pave the streets. They worked for protection, which usually the knights, who were one step above them, would, guess what, be able to protect them a little bit better if they did something for the kingdom or for the area, whatever, the land. This system reinforced a rigid social hierarchy, and it persisted in various forms throughout Europe for centuries. Kind of. I think the last time it was actually like a real hierarchy was maybe the 60s with Princess Diane. Maybe? But I really don't know. I don't look into the modern European kingdom craft, I guess, if we want to call it that. I don't really look that into it, but it's definitely worth, you know what? Viewers at home, you look into it, unless if Dom already looked into it. Maybe he did. He probably did, because he knows what he's doing, right? Right.
That's right.
Now, I think we could talk about the Enlightenment, a period that brought a huge shift in how people thought about politics and society. This would be more so like kind of the Renaissance, kind of, new thinkers, right? Now, thinkers like John Locke, Montesquieu, and Rousseau were pivotal during this time. Have you heard of any of them?
At least not. It's been a long time.
John Locke, Montesquieu, Rousseau? No?
Yes, it rings a bell. It does ring a bell.
It rings a bell, okay. Well, Locke, for instance, is known for his ideas on natural rights, the belief that life, liberty, and property, no, not the pursuit of happiness, and property are fundamental. He argued that governments exist to protect these rights, and if they fail, citizens have the right to revolt. Let's repeat that quote again. He argued that governments exist to protect these rights, and if they fail, citizens have the right to revolt.
Hmm. Oh
That's
boy.
right. That's right, everyone. We should revolt now.
Ah!
Then there's also Montesquieu, right? He who gave us the concept of separation of powers. He believed that dividing government into branches, like, what are the branches, Dom?
Mm. Executive branch,
Yep,
legislative branch, and
yep,
judicial branch.
there we go. He believed that dividing the government into different branches, executive, legislative, and judicial, would prevent any one group from gaining too much power. Because he was like, yo, there were kings before. Whoa, they had all the power, and look at this. We don't want our land to become a dictatorship. So separating the powers would ensure that not one group of people have the say in everything. Which in modern day, you have the executive, legislative, judicial. Now, also as a part of that, it was typically believed that the best way to divide things up is to have, for example, a mixed group of three, right? What I mean by that is, like, say you have a Democratic president, you would kind of want a Republican, like, judicial branch. Like, that's what I'm kind of saying. Like, a mixture throughout the three is typically best in terms of that, because with the lawmakers, usually, if they could agree from Republican versus Democrat, those laws are typically more passed because, well, guess what? Everyone agreed with this, so it's a great law.
You should agree there too.
Usually, but of course, with every type of thing, doesn't even matter if it's religious or political, there is always going to be somebody who thinks this, and then somebody who thinks the opposite of that. So there's always going to be some fight back, bite back. What is the word? Knockback. That's the word. There's always going to be some knockback when it comes to any political, any law that's being passed, but it was believed that, and it still is, by modern philosophers, or modern political scientists, whatever you want to call them,
Just political people.
political people,
There you go.
who aren't in power, by the way, political people who are studying the political stuff, whatever.
Politicians.
Smart. It's the people who study the modern politicians. There you go. The politician no furs. Polinographers. There we go. Sure.
Yeah, they record political debates. Or
The study of the graphy is the whatever. The people who study current the current process, right?
anyways,
Um,
moving on here.
the modern people who study that stuff all agree that we should do exactly as Montesquieu once pitched, that we should have kind of a divide. If we have a Republican president, it should be a Democratic Congress. The Senate should be this way, that way, this way, that way, this way. Exactly for the reason of, if all of them agree, it's a good law. If all of them disagree, it's a bad law, which is happening in modern day because of certain things that are being put into place. Dom will definitely tell the viewers all about that stuff, right?
That's right.
That's right. Um, Now the last one, Rousseau. They contributed to the idea of a social contract, where citizens give up certain freedoms in exchange for government protections and the rule of law. His ideas were especially influential in revolutionary movements. Now, it could be like giving up money for someone to believe, or not believe, someone to pass laws that could impact them. That's why you see lobbyists. That's why you see briberies at that level, at the Congress level, at the presidential level, even. There are companies who are very rich who will support somebody's campaign in order to get somewhere. That's usually what happens with the rich companies. It should be noted, 9 times out of 10, any candidate, doesn't matter what side, can be bought. That candidate can be bought by rich establishments. Doesn't matter what side, it's usually something that the person the first person to start yelling about politics usually is talking about this and how this person is bad for this reason. However, their person usually accepts bribes in some way too, whether it's financial support, whether it's like an advertising campaign, something. They're usually bought by rich, influential businesses. That's typically why in politics it's usually business first. That's because somebody decided, hey, we'll pay the president. So then the president will believe the same things that help our business function. So
Mm.
I do not want to hear anybody who's listening to this say that one person or the other is a problem for that reason, because everyone does it. Almost. There are some third parties and Green Party members who don't get the support because they aren't with the big two. They aren't Democratic or Republican, so the big businesses don't care about them because they're not, a D or an R.
So this does. I don't know if this is exactly the same thing as what you are talking about, but I do have something that I researched about, which I'll probably get into later.
We'll probably get back into it later, and if we're gonna break the boundary a little bit and kind of give you a little bit of behind the scenes stuff, um, viewers, we're probably gonna be doing this in a few different parts. Maybe it's just gonna be part one and two, but maybe it's part one, two, and three. Who knows?
Yep.
We're gonna try to maybe do it in one go, but I don't know.
I'm gonna be honest. I don't even think we'll have the time for all, but we would at least like to get your parts, Jake.
Definitely, and I'm about halfway or whatever. I'm trying to speed through these a little bit, but
And let's not.
if, of
Yeah.
course, of course, if we need to kind of go on little tangents that are informative and you know great to have,
Yep.
we'll do that.
Yeah. And another snippet of behind the scenes. I do have another episode that's in the post production stage right now. So
He's editing and he's starring in an episode.
whatever
What a
episode is.
dude!
So this episode will likely be out before that one is.
But yeah, I guess getting back into it though, he will probably say something that could tie in to that whole idea in maybe a different part, in his section, let's just call it.
Yeah.
But it's just a terrible situation because a lot of people, and it's usually the people who are spouting all of this on social media or just blog sites, whatever, the loudest people are typically the least informed.
Hmm.
It's the thing that Squidward once said. People usually like to be loud when they're not confident or something, right? And then Plankton's like, correct.
Yep.
But
The
that
words of
sentiment is
Squidward.
real.
The words of Squidward have lived on.
that sentiment is real, though. I mean, I'm probably butchering the quote, but it's something along the lines of that. Uh, it's like the louder you are, the least confident or something. Like the least confident you are, the louder you become because you want others to think that you are confident, something like that. Or maybe it's that the louder you are, the smarter you are supposed to be. Well, regardless, a lot of people who talk about politics don't know the fact that both of the major parties are not saints. It's not just one or the other. They both accept some sort of, let's call it a bribe.
Hmm.
It
And
could be money, it could be support, it could be anything, but it's a
versus,
bribe nonetheless.
yeah, bribe. That doesn't even have to be political related.
It doesn't have to be financial related. Like, I don't know, maybe somebody buys a library and names it after insert campaign politic guy here, right?
I could,
So now this is the President DomJake, right?
sure.
President DomJake Library.
Yeah.
That's not, financial support
Hmm.
to their campaign, but it looks great on a resume, sort of. Not that presidents have resumes, but you
Hmm.
get the idea. It looks great
Here's
in
an.
their universe.
I mean, here's a real life example. I don't know if this exactly relates, but there is an airport named after Ronald Reagan.
There's also JFK, there's also Washington, there's also, I believe, Cleveland, I believe a lot of different things, right? A lot of different things are named after presidents, and I should also say influential people. You also hear Martin Luther King Boulevard. You'd
Hmm.
also hear the Thurgood Marshall Library. You would hear, like, well, maybe you don't want to hear this depending on who you are, but you would hear, like, Robert E. Lee Elementary.
Hmm.
You know, Ulysses Grant. The all goes on, all goes on. It's an
Not
endless amount.
Lincoln Park with the K instead of the C.
And then Lincoln Park. Rest in peace, Chester Bennington.
But we have a new lead singer, but we're not doing the concerts episode again.
Part two. No, no,
Yeah.
just kidding. Just kidding. Just kidding. We're not doing that yet.
No.
Um, but no, it's wild though. Like, how do these ideas influence political revolutions, though? Do you have any ideas?
It definitely does influence modern
Not
politics.
modern. Influence political revolutions.
I can't really say I'm big on that. I can't really say I know.
All right. Well, the American and French revolutions were definitely deeply shaped by the Enlightenment thought, which
Okay.
I know we went on a tangent there. I'll say it again.
Freedom
Uh,
fries.
um, sure. And the Rousseau potatoes, freedom fry. There we go. It ties in. There we go. I'll reread the Rousseau stuff. Rousseau contributed the idea of a social contract where citizens gave up certain freedoms in exchange for government protection and the rule of law. His ideas were especially influential in revolutionary movements. Now, the American and French revolutions were definitely uh, shaped by that Enlightenment thought.
Hmm. We've had us in like France. We've had. There have been some moments. Let's just say.
Some big moments, and honestly, we should learn from France. They revolt, and France, they get stuff done because the citizens, all of them, even if they don't agree on the same candidate, they all see that their current situation is shit and they will burn down buildings until the
Mm.
French leaders are like, fine, we'll listen. We need to revolt. Let's start a revolution, you and I, Tom, right now. And we'll have
Okay.
it. We'll have it on January 6th, 2025, okay?
Mm. There we
That's a
go.
modern thing. You'll probably talk about that later on.
Futuristic, right?
But the Declaration of Independence draws directly from Locke's ideas about government and
Declaration.
individual rights. And in France, the revolutionaries took Rousseau's notion of the general will to overthrow the monarchy and establish a republic. The monarchy, of course, being who is a famous French monarchy member?
There's like a couple.
Famous. Famous French lady, maybe.
There's a couple of them here.
A certain revolution.
French. Uh,
Ooh.
the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah, yes, yes, Princess Industrial. Yep.
Princess Diana.
No, she's not French.
God damn it.
To that one French viewer, I apologize. Or, you're welcome, depending on how you see this.
Marie
So close, Marie Antoinette.
I was very close there though.
You were close on your third attempt.
Marie Antoinette, Eleanor of Aquitaine, Isabella of France.
Marie Antoinette was one that was definitely in the middle of the French Revolution. You know, the part where maybe they revolted against the French rulers and one by one chopped their noggins off
Mm.
because they did all of these laws that made all of them suffer. It's the same sort of idea as the modern day, let's just call it what it is, assassinations. Hmm.
Yep, there are. Yeah, but there are 14 French queens that are at least well known.
But during the Revolution,
Yeah, but
I don't think Marie Antoinette was a queen. Maybe she was. Was she? I don't
she's
think she was.
she's a
Was she?
famous French queen as far as I
She
know.
was a queen. Oh, okay.
And then there's
Slay Queen, right?
Slay. Yep,
Or
Mary Queen of
Slain. Mary Queen of Scots. Oh, we could do some episodes about Mary Queen of Scots though, but
Mary Queen of Scots. Yep.
because there's there's a connection between her and the superstition of turning the lights off in the bathroom, fogging up the mirror, and saying something 3 times in the mirror.
Hmm.
There's also a drink with the same name.
Right.
Yeah. Um, she's a historical character that we definitely could talk about because there's interesting shit there.
Mm.
Regardless,
All right. What do you have next?
regardless, in France, the revolutionaries took Rousseau's notion of general will to overthrow the monarchy and establish a republic. The Enlightenment gave these movements the intellectual framework they needed to demand change. Of course, they also had a little bit of choppy chops in order to help push along the idea that they wanted change and demanded it. These revolutions also sparked other movements globally, as people began to question traditional forms of government and seek more democratic or representative systems.
Mm.
I mean, it's the same sort of thing as cuisine, it's the same sort of thing as just ideas. If something happens in one nation and the other nation next to it happens to see it, they'll take notes. Whether good notes or bad notes doesn't matter. They'll maybe get inspired to do something different.
All right.
Next up is colonialism. European powers expanded across the globe in the 15th through the 19th centuries, establishing colonies in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. Colonialism had profound political impacts. For one, it established a system where European nations exerted political and economic control over large parts of the world. That is, such as some of the Virgin Islands. Some of that is under British control. Different colonies, different land masses that are just under control of, in this case, Europe. Um, Even if technically it's not in Europe, that's how things work. Just like Puerto Rico is technically American, and Puerto Rican citizens can actually vote for presidents. However, it's also not recognized as part of America. It's weird. Things are weird sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
The colonized regions were often forced to adopt the political systems of their colonizers, which kind of begs to ask, maybe Puerto Rico, if we didn't control them, maybe they wouldn't have a democracy. Maybe they would do something different. But because we took control over them, or some people would say, we adopted them. Now they're part of the family. Except they're not part of the 50 states. They're
They're just there.
guess what? They took the family photo. There you go. You're a part of it. You're just not in it.
You're just there for the picture.
You took the picture for us. You're a part of this.
There you go.
Even though it's like, Puerto Rico's like, but I'm not in the family photo. At least Photoshop me in. And they're like, no. You just take awesome photos, Puerto Rico. It's in your name. We should call you Portrait Rico. Yeah? Okay.
Puerto Rico.
And the exploitation of resources and people set the stage for political struggles that continued long after colonial rule ended. Many modern political conflicts in post-colonial nations can be traced back to colonialism. As colonialism expanded, though, so did revolutions. In the 18th and 19th centuries, we saw revolutions that gave birth to modern nation-states. The American Revolution, French Revolution, and Latin American revolutions each challenged traditional monarchies. These revolutions often resulted in the establishment of republics or democratic systems. But they also set the stage for nationalism, an ideology that linked political power to a shared identity based on culture, language, or history. Nationalism. You know what that is? Of course you do. But what is it?
Alright. Nationalism essentially is an ideology or movement that promotes the interests and identity of a nation. Often with a goal. Hold on.
You're reading one of your sites. If it ain't broke, right?
Yep. With the goal of creating a nation state.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, in your own words.
I guess it's a way of getting people interested in making a nation. Creating a nation state.
Okay, that's a big red X right there. So essentially, the whole idea is nationalism is just putting one's own area over others. It's we are first, we are the best.
Yep.
Putting in other words, some presidents of the United States are nationalists, where it's America first, screw the others. I will press a nuke and eradicate every other country. America is best. All for the name of America. Americans versus the world. All of you suck.
Mm.
No immigrants, no visitors, even. Not even if they're moving here, right? No
Mm.
visitors from other countries. That's what a nationalist viewpoint kind of sees things as. Now, of course, humans are filled with complexities, right? So if somebody is a nationalist, but they also like money, they might let tourists in. And they'll be like, yeah, but spend the money first. I don't like you, but I like your green, right? Like,
Mm.
that's essentially what nationalism is.
Yep.
Now, we got some big stuff to talk about now. Can guess them? Two of them?
Hmm. You got
His, his
communism and socialism.
historical things, exactly. Communism and socialism. Now, in the 19th century, we also saw the rise of ideologies like socialism and communism. Karl Marx, of course, is a key figure here, advocating for a classless society where the means of production are owned collectively. Now, historically, that was pitched as an economic system, not a political one. But somebody somewhere was like, Oi, I think Karl Marx made a political system. That was not its intention. Now, maybe I might sound like a commie red guy here, but it's supposed to be an economic thing, not a political thing. So, if anything, it would be just as if, let's say, our democratic system right now was in play. However, it didn't matter if you were poor or rich, all of that money is going to the nation, to all those around you. It's supposed to be what's yours is ours, what's mine is ours, right? It's a shared system. It's nobody's, it's ours.
Mm.
Doesn't matter who contributed more, doesn't matter who contributed less. That's what it was for. I need to say that because a lot of people only see communism as the political belief, which was not the intention. The intention was an economic belief. Okay, that aside, though, um, advocating for a classless society where the means of production are owned collectively. Communism and socialism were responses to the inequalities created by capitalism during the Industrial Revolution. You know, that thing in the Americas? Well, it also
Socialism.
existed. It also existed in a lot of places. Not talking about socialism, talking about capitalism
Mm.
in the Industrial Revolution. That whole I need that big car because someone told me I need that big car. All the factory booms, all the mechanical stuff, the Industrial Revolution.
Eh, just because Timmy has the big car doesn't mean you should, Tom.
Well, back in the day, it was just because Timmy has a car means that you have to have one too.
So
That was
can't
the idea.
so
It
you can't
wasn't
ride any horses.
it wasn't big, it wasn't little, because back in the day it was literally one type of car because that was the first car invented.
Excuse me.
Because that was the first car invented.
Right.
Of course, I mean, people still did horse and buggy. People still do horse and buggy. They're called the Amish and the rich.
Hmm. And people
Funny,
ride horses
funny,
for fun.
funny how things kind of go in a cyclical nature, right? It's like back then everybody rode, horses. Everyone was on horses. If you weren't, then eh.
Yep.
Like it was for like the common person, right? But then suddenly somebody invented a car somewhere and was like, by Jove, I think I'm gonna ride that thing. And so only the rich were able to get the cars, right?
I guess so, yeah.
Now we're to a point where it's literally the opposite. It's, even a poor person can kind of get a car sometimes, right? But
Probably like a
if you're wealthy, dang, you're riding horses every day if you can afford it. It's
mm,
backwards.
yeah, you don't need to spend money on gas, you could just go to the grocery store and buy apples.
Sure.
If grocery stores were still a thing back in those days.
Come to think of it, I don't know if that was. I mean, they had specialist like areas, like it was the fishmonger area, it was the leather craftsman area, but come to think of it, I don't think there was like a lot of general stores.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was like a more so newer concept, and by newer I mean like 1900s, maybe early 19s. But anywho, Marx predicted that the working class, or proletariat, would eventually rise up and overthrow the capitalist system, aka the system that America and a lot of the world is currently in. The stuff, that means you have to have a lot of money in order to do something, and if you can't pay us, we'll punish you, that system. Now, Lenin later adapted these ideas to establish the Soviet Union, and communism spread as a revolutionary ideology across the 20th century. When it got to Lenin's hands, that was a political system. But back in Karl Marx's eyes, that was for economy. That was to revolt against capitalism. This wasn't so then you could have one nation ruling forever, because that's essentially like a dictatorship slash monarch slash kingdom, whatever you want to call it. Next up, we have the Cold War and global politics. Now, after World War II, the world was essentially split between two political ideologies: capitalism, led by the United States, and communism, led by the Soviet Union. The Cold War wasn't just a standoff between two superpowers, though. It shaped global politics. Countries around the world aligned themselves with either the US or USSR, leading to proxy wars, political coups, and massive military buildups. And while the Cold War ended with the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, its political effects are still felt today, especially in former communist states. Lastly, anything you want to put up?
Yeah, seems like I just will say communism is not seen in a good light, anyways.
It isn't because of what it turned into, what it was misunderstood as.
Yeah.
It's you know the game of telephone, right? It's the, you whisper something in somebody's ear and they tell it to somebody else.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
A chain of even five is enough for that thing to go completely bonkers, right? Maybe if I whispered into your ear, maybe you would understand it and you would whisper the same thing. But somebody's going to hear somebody say something as a different thing. Doesn't matter. That's why all of the videos, all of the times that you've done that game, by the time it gets to the last person, it's like, how the heck did you even get there? That's the same thing with communism. But now, since we're in the modern day, when I'm referring to communism now, I'll talk about it as a political system, when it originally shouldn't have been. And lastly, at least for me, well, yeah, I mean, we also did research some things together, but I guess lastly for the me section. Lastly, let's talk about women in politics. Women fought hard for their place in the political sphere, with suffrage movements starting in the late 19th century and growing in the 20th. In many countries, women didn't get the right to vote until the 20th century, but once they did, we saw some trailblazing female political leaders like Margaret Thatcher, Indira Gandhi, and Angela Merkel, who had a lasting impact on both national and international politics. And today, women continue to push for representation and equality in political spaces all around the world. The fight for the fight for gender parity in politics is ongoing, but progress is always being made. Just not last election, but 2 elections ago in 2016, the big fighter for the Democratic Party was Hillary Clinton.
Yep, who was also the first lady of Bill Clinton.
Who was a lady. Now, I don't think she was the first woman to run for presidency. I don't think so. But
But yeah.
she was like the first one to essentially win, but the Electoral College was like, nope.
I guess at the end of the day, I really don't think it matters who we have as a president, just as long as they know what they're doing. But at the same time, sure.
I mean, I truly would think, and this is me just saying opinion. This isn't me, trying to, start a fight or whatever. But just a civilized discussion. I really think that it is time that we do have a female running. That we have a female in office. Which we have somebody running this time because Biden stepped down. We have Kamala Harris, who is running, and we also have Jasmine Sherman, who is a third-party candidate who is running or trying to run anyway. But, third parties don't really get a lot of the campaign money, so I don't know if she's on the ballot for presidency, but Jasmine Sherman is both young and a woman, so that's fun. We need in my opinion, we need some youth, and I think we need some women in office, because they think differently, and maybe they found a way to, have a little bit of they have a compromise. Maybe Harris, or I could even say Sherman, could have a good compromise between everybody, but because the testosterone-filled ocean might be, just filled with people yelling and having to be right, maybe a woman in office would be like, oh, I hear all of that. Let's try to think about this and compromise. Maybe. Don't know. Who knows?
Time will really tell.
If Harris does, become elected and she royally actually screws things up, then, okay, maybe I'll bite my tongue there. And notice how I said actually screwed things up. I'm not saying stuff like, just because somebody said, oh, you didn't give $1 to the, I don't know, Fighting Protection Agency, that means I'm gonna blame you. No, I mean actually screws up the nation. People like to say that Biden and Trump ruined the nation. The nation's been ruined for a while. Before those two. Like, truly.
What? Yeah.
Truly, it kind of was ruined. You know what? you're talking about the modern stuff. So I'll leave. I will leave the ruining to you, I guess. Now, do you think we have time to enter the stuff that we did together?
We might have some time as long as we don't spend too much time talking about it.
That's true.
So I think we can do, and then for my stuff, we can probably do that in part two. Or at
Yeah,
least
let's I guess let's look at some of the collaborative research tasks anyway.
mm, how did technology influence political process?
Oh, I was thinking we go in order, but
Yeah,
but
no, but no,
whatever.
you doesn't really. Yeah, you could do. We could do it in order.
At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter. You know what? Actually, let's get you to start with technology then. Let's get you to start there.
Technology.
That way you could actually, you know, say a say more than just two sentences at once, right?
But before I do talk about how things have influenced, I do have the definition of what the political process essentially refers to here. It refers to the activities and mechanisms that govern the distribution of power and resources within a society. It encompasses elections, policymaking, lobbying, and the exercise of political authority.
So, what does that mean?
It refers to pretty much how you can.
Uh-huh.
Yep, that's the No, but I do have the actual definition here.
No, I kind of need a dumbed down version, man.
Authority, policies, lobbying,
Like I'm
campaigning.
five.
You're pretty much just, Yep, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, compromising. So pretty much what the political process does, it encompasses the activities, institutions, and interactions through which societies make collective decisions. It is a system that governs the allocation of values, resources, and power within a society. You see why I'm not really
So,
big into politics?
it's not politics, it's just research. You're not big into research. Um, so, in other words, you could say the backbone of how a political system works, I guess. The backbone.
So that's pretty much what it is.
Why did you say that?
Because what if I wanted to make this episode longer?
You don't need to waffle in order to make this long.
The political process can be defined as the set of actions and interactions through which individuals and groups exercise political power and influence. It encompasses various activities such as voting, lobbying, campaigning, policy formulation, and decision making. So it's practically pretty much the brain of politics here.
The mitochondria.
Yeah. The scope of the political process extends from the local level of community politics to the international area of global diplomacy. Oh my god, I can't fucking say this.
Yep, diplomacy.
Diplomacy and governance. Right. So it's essentially like the central processing unit of the whole politics.
Okay,
This
it's the backbone. Okay.
right. It just goes up. This is what happens. This is how the voting thing works. So, how it evolved is it's definitely evolved significantly over time, adapting into changes in technology, demographics, and social dynamics. From ancient forms of direct democracy to modern representative systems, the political process has continuously adapted to meet the evolving needs and aspiration of societies.
Okay, now what does that mean?
Right. Essentially, it's kind of like a city. Well, not literally a city, but they pretty much maintain the government. They're responsible for pretty much enforcing everything from welfare to, enforcing laws.
Okay, right on, right on.
And let's just say the way of voting, the way to register to vote has kind of changed too from just being on paper to digitally signing up to vote.
Well, that's not to say that you can't do paper, because I mean,
You can still
they
do paper.
they still accept it, I believe. That's one of the things that I think still can accept paper.
As ballots.
Yeah, that too, actually.
That's all paper.
Yeah, you can do it online still.
Yeah, if you don't want to leave your house, you can.
And absentees.
Yep.
A lot of ways to do things.
Yeah. This leads me to technology and politics.
Nice.
From the printing press, you get newspapers that get sent to people's houses. Oh, vote for this president or third party if you don't want the norm.
Let's
And
face it, most of the time the newspaper's not going to list, a third party in other than name, right? Like they usually mention like everybody who's campaigning, but they're not gonna deep dive into them.
mhm. And let's just say within the past decade, social media, whether for bad or for worse, or better for worse, actually, has definitely shaped the way. Yeah, definitely these representatives get their message out there. You'll probably see a lot of these political ads, whether you're scrolling through Facebook, Instagram, or Snapchat.
I mean,
Like,
even more.
if you wonder,
You'll see them in anywhere, man. You don't even have to use an app.
yeah, you just go literally online too.
Anywhere.
Doesn't even have to be doesn't have to be mobile, but that's really not that's not the point. But now I do have another thing I have gotten. At least I've compiled or at least found a list of.
How
There
about
are
how about maybe you could talk about the technological aspect of some of the actual campaigners, you know?
uh,
Not just spam calls, not just blog ads or whatever, but like how do presidents themselves use social media?
well,
You could also lump in first ladies here too if you want to.
okay, well, I'm going to talk about I was going to bring up a former president who may probably be president again depending on who wins. Trump here, he's kind of one of those funny presidents, at least.
I do not think so. I think
Oh,
we were high when we were like, yeah, you could do it.
no, but recently, at least as of me recording this may be a month ago, there was something about at least former President Trump wanting to work at McDonald's.
That
It,
no, that has to be a joke. That
I mean,
no.
I don't think it has to be like a skit, but it's supposed to be fun. It's not supposed to be taken seriously.
Like that sounds like the onion. That does not sound right at all.
I mean, it's not a way for me to want to vote for you, but who knows?
No, no, like seriously, that sounds like a made up story. I don't think that's right.
Maybe.
But I mean, I guess that's another thing that is, on the technological side of politics. There are a lot of fake stories out there. The
Fake
rumors, maybe memes and videos, deep fakes, all that jazz.
AI, AI Joe Biden.
AI presidents playing Mario Baseball.
Hmm. How about, yep, Trump and Obama playing Minecraft? But,
The list goes on. That's technology too, man.
yeah, AI, that's probably how you get some misinformation. Someone could put in chat GPT, like, oh, write me an article about
But that's the
Trump
thing.
jumping.
That's the thing. That hasn't even. That's not new. A lot of people made up stories, even back in the '60s.
Oh, John F. Kennedy juggled giraffes. Like, that could be something silly, which people won't take seriously, but hey, someone could write a story about that.
So that's the importance of the grassy knoll.
For better or for worse, technology has done some things in the whole political spectrum.
For better or for worse, it's there.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yep, it is.
What else do you have?
I have something here that are called political scandals.
Ooh, it also kind of ties into the technology stuff too. Sometimes.
Yeah, well, these scandals, though, are from like, some of them are from the 70s, some of them are
Uh-huh.
from the 90s.
I'm sure there are some of them from the 1800s.
I'm sure there are.
Somewhere.
Yep. I'm not going to go through every single list because there's a lot of them.
Yeah, because presidents have been known to be freaky
Hmm. Sure, yeah. But,
and scandalous.
right.
Go
Okay,
on, pick your top three favorite ones or whatever.
we're going to talk about this one, like called Watergate, whatever this is.
Woohoo! Yeah, Watergate.
The scandal that all other scandals are measured against. What isn't a gate these days? First made headlines as an odd break in at Democratic National Committee headquarters and eventually brought down a president. President Richard Nixon and his administration engaged in questionable activities to ensure his reelection in 1972. When those activities came to light, mostly through the reporting of Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein. Huh. One of the I wonder if the Bernstein Bears know this guy.
I don't know if that's related.
I don't know. I know. Jokes. The
I am
administration
not a crook.
the administration engaged in a cover-up at the highest level, facing the possibility of impeachment. Nixon became the first president to resign from office in August of 1974. Hmm.
Fancy, funky, fresh, Nixon.
Mm-hmm. That's right, citizens. Okay. Here's something from 1988.
Ooh, before we actually do though, you've seen Futurama before, right?
I've seen a bit of it.
A
I've
bit of
never
it.
never watched that as much as I've seen Family Guy.
Sure, but you know a part of that is they have they cut off the heads of certain historical leaders or celebrities even, and they have they're talking heads in jars, right? They were able to scientifically achieve that, where it's like even after the body's gone, the head could still remain here in this fluid. Well, the
Hmm.
president of Earth in Futurama is is Richard Nixon's head. He's literally
Hmm.
so so that's why
Woohoo!
he's hey, he's the president back in the '70s, and he's the president in 30,200 or whatever. I don't know.
Eh. By the time that happens, we won't even be there.
Well, we might be talking heads too, you know?
Hey, who knows? Technology can get better for us to live longer. Right. Okay. I got something that involves Bill Clinton.
All right.
During his 1992 run for president, Clinton was dogged by past rumors of extramarital affairs.
Oh
These,
no!
hmm, running for president, running through people. Those rumors hit the tabloids when Flowers, like Jennifer Flowers, an Arkansas state employee, alleged that she and Clinton carried on a 12-year fling. Both Bill and Hillary denied the affair, but Flowers later declared under oath that the affair took place. 6 years later, during a court case about another alleged Clinton affair, America learned about Monica Lewinsky and her claims of a sexual encounter with the president.
I did not have sexual relations with Monica Lewinsky.
Mm. At first, President Clinton denied the affair, but later admitted to the country that he had, quote unquote, a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate.
Well,
Question.
that kind of begs the question, because there are a lot of things that some people could label as inappropriate. What does that mean? Maybe a lot of people think, yeah, we banged, but maybe it was just inappropriate, like, oh, I'm just gonna watch you do things. That could be inappropriate.
Hmm.
Voyeurism, that's usually up there as like a weird thing.
Hmm.
So, is it what we think it is?
Maybe. Maybe.
Look at me trying to give a devil's advocate for something that probably actually happened,
Ugh. Right. Um.
but just in case. Maybe he's innocent.
Right. Who knows? Oh,
Carry on.
Billy. Um. Questions over whether the president perjured himself led to his impeachment trial in the Senate. The first in over 130 years.
Nice. What was the other one? What was the one before that 130 years?
Hmm. I thought you would know that.
Ah, but I didn't research that part.
Hmm. Right. The Senate voted to acquit President Clinton, ending one of the most tumultuous episodes.
Tumultuous?
Yes, episodes in the nation's history. In the 2016 race for president, Donald Trump said the Lewinsky episode is fair game against Hillary Clinton. And that was that one.
The Lewinsky is fair game.
Hmm. Oh god, yep, remember. Yep, I remember when this was big news and well, not this specific, but I
You
remember
were in
those.
the 80s?
No.
Your grandpa.
No, but I remember in 2016, Trump and Clinton were quite. They're quite the competition. At this point, I don't even care anymore.
The modern ones are just shouting. It's like it's a shout match.
It's literally what it is at this point. I don't. But,
There used to be decorum. Like the debates and the doesn't matter what level. A lot of people back in the days used to be civil with their debates. It was like, I will shut up and hear what you're going to say, and I will reply to the thing that you said. It's not, but the illegal immigrants. No, but the illegal immigrants.
you
No,
two
but the illegal
stop.
immigrants.
Okay, let him speak.
Like that's. I mean, if anything, that's a great reason why there's always that adjudicator or that person like in the middle that's like, okay, stop, stop, stop. They
Mm,
still have the floor. Not you yet. Stop, stop, stop.
yep.
Them. Now it's
Okay.
you. Like,
Yeah. Okay, I got one more I'm gonna share of the scandal. This one is by the name of Jack Abramoff. Don't get rid of the Abram. Gifts for favors. That's the easiest way to describe the scandal involving former lobbyist Jack Abramoff, who was known as the man who bought Washington. His massive web of political corruption involved his clients, millions of dollars, free meals, tickets, trips to famous golf courses, and members of Congress. Digging by the Washington Post eventually led to an inquiry by the Justice Department. Abramoff and others, including the then chair of the powerful House Administration Committee, went to prison after Abramoff left prison. He wrote a book about the scandal.
And you, as part of your research, you read that book, right?
I did not. I only had this select amount of time to do this.
Yeah, the last 3 years. That wasn't enough for you? Because we record these in batches, right? We re-
Right.
we recorded this, all of these. We're currently recording number 500, right?
Yes, sir. No. But, yep. Anything else here? So you. Oh. Do you want to say your thing before I mention this?
Before we continue, let's take a little moment to break down the basics of the political parties and ideologies. Now, these can be pretty confusing for people who don't follow politics closely, but a lot of you probably have heard of these terms. Maybe you don't know exactly what they are, but maybe you slapped a label on yourself and just said that's what you are. Who knows? At its core, a political party is an organized group of people who share similar ideas about how a country should be governed. They often work to influence government policies and get their members elected to office, but every party is usually tied to a certain ideology. So, what's an ideology then? Dom, maybe you have an answer off the top of your head. What is an ideology?
An ideology is essentially like a persuade opinion. Political.
I like it, Picasso.
Mm.
Simply put, it's a set of beliefs or values about how society should work, and it helps shape a party's goals. Let's go over some of the major political ideologies now. First up is liberalism.
Mm.
Liberals generally believe in individual rights, equality, and democracy. They tend to support government intervention in areas like healthcare, education, and welfare to promote social justice. On the flip side, we have conservatism, which emphasizes tradition, social stability, and limited government. Conservatives typically advocate for free markets, a strong national defense, and lower taxes. Then there's socialism, where the focus is on economic equality and collective ownership of resources. Socialists believe that the government should play a major role in redistributing wealth to reduce inequality. Let's not forget libertarianism, which is all about maximizing individual freedom. Libertarians argue for minimal government interference in both personal and economic matters, often pushing for limited laws and regulations. There are also more extreme ideologies like fascism, which promotes authoritarianism and nationalism, as well as communism, which seeks a classless society where all property is publicly owned. It's important to remember that most political parties today don't strictly follow just one ideology. They often combine different elements depending on the country and specific areas and specific issues that they're dealing with. Now, for example, the US, the Democratic Party tends to lean toward liberalism, whereas the Republican Party tends to lean more conservative. In Europe, many countries have socialist or green parties alongside more traditional conservative or liberal ones. I could not say authoritarianism.
Hmm. I'm pro- then we're maybe I'll keep that in.
Hey, it's only fair, but honestly, like, that was like 2 minutes of the same word.
Hmm.
That was wild.
All
But it's definitely one of those things where it's like at the end of the day, in my opinion anyway, the best way to navigate this is to find a middle ground in between, the conservative, liberal, the socialism, the libertarianism, even fascist communism, right? We should find like a middle ground between everything, which it's either going to be hard or impossible to do. But there's gotta be something that everybody can be on board with. We need to put all of this behind. Instead, we're every 4 years bickering endlessly about the things that don't really matter.
right.
Like, like the repeal, like a year or two ago, maybe even three, Roe v. Wade, right?
Uh-huh.
Abortion stuff.
Mm.
In reality, that whole argument is going against what the founding fathers wanted. The founding fathers wanted church and state to be separate. Church is separate from politics, is what they wanted and they fought for. We're at a point where just because a lot of Christians are in offices, whether Senate or Congress or even president, we're at a point where now it's kind of meshing. Today is not what the founding fathers wanted in more than one way, but we're going to talk about the blending of church and state. Abortion should be up to the individual.
Mm.
It shouldn't be clouded with the mindset of because of this religion, we have to make it illegal. Religion and state, the church and state does not mix, should not mix, and therefore they shouldn't have had any, I shouldn't say any right to repeal it, but I mean any right to list the reason why they repeal it as because the Bible says this, because my religion says this. That's not by founding fathers' wants and desires. That's not what should have happened. They
Oh.
used religion to pass a law. The founding fathers wrote that as a rule not to do.
Mm.
And we're doing it. And most people nowadays either forgot their history lessons or never knew that you weren't supposed to do this. So it's not even really a blame of the current people in charge, even though I think if you're in charge of something, you should at least know its history, something about it, instead of just seeing your paycheck go up because you were a president. Who cares where this nation came from? I'm the president. I get to sit here and be protected by a Secret Service for the rest of my life.
Mm.
But
I don't know. I don't know.
this,
People,
this might
history will
sound
repeat itself.
right, but this might sound like I'm trying to disparage religion. I'm not. That's why in the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment is literally the right to, well, freedom of speech and expression, the right to your religion. You can have that, but you can have yours and I could have mine and they could have theirs, all in this nation. It's not meant for just one, even though, sure, a good percentage of them, a good percentage of the religious people in this nation are Christian Catholic, sure, but it's never going to be all. And the fact that people are making laws based off of because my religion says so. In America, that's a flawed. That's a flawed way of thinking. We need, if anything, we need to repeal different laws because of political reasons, not because of religious reasons. Like all of the people who voted on taking away a woman's right to an abortion are all religious Christian Catholics.
Hmm. I think I
And
do.
that's the way they stack it. The people who want certain laws passed, I'm just using him as an example because this was proven right. But when Trump was president, he stacked like the judicial area to be like a lot of like white Catholic, like rich people or whatever. Like he stacked a lot of the lawmakers as religious Catholic Christians who they would pass this type of law because they agree, even though religion shouldn't be a part of the lawmaking process to begin with. Rant aside, go on.
The whole, oh yeah, about the whole like abortion thing. I mean, I will. There's definitely different ways people can perceive it.
Definitely. And
I mean,
it's just, it's up to the individual.
yeah,
If, if, if you don't agree with it, well, guess what? You're not going to get an abortion because you don't have the capacity for
we
that.
don't even. Not, both of us don't even are not in that position.
Hey, if you've seen some of our live action stuff, it looks like I'm pregnant, but I'm not.
But I will say, sure, you can do what you want. I mean, this is just
You're able to think how you want. That's the
what
beauty of freedom. But
here. Here's this also the thing. At the same time, though, you're also taking a life of a living thing.
are you? That's part of the debate. That's part of it. Is it is it a life when it's just a single cell? Is it alive when it's a sperm cell coming out your booty?
Yeah. Anyway,
Is because it is alive at the sperm point. A cell is alive.
right.
If
But
you peel your skin off, that's killing a life. Like where is this line? And at the same time, the same people who are saying we're taking away a life whenever it comes in the process of the abortion stuff, the same people tend to be also fine with, you know, hunting. That's taking a life that's already alive. Like that's already been walking out.
hmm, I
Like
guess I guess yeah. I mean, hunting.
in my opinion, as soon as it hits the point where the baby is it needs to come out, whether C-section or naturally, that's at the point where I see it as a life. I don't see it as a life whenever it's anything before. An embryo, a zygote, doesn't matter. To me, that's just a thing that's leeching off of a mother's nutrients. But once it is free from that umbilical cord, that is my opinion where life begins.
Yep. And also, this is just us
This is just us talking about like
opinion.
I'm saying how a lot of people believe.
But then,
I could also say the other side, but you know what? You could say the other side.
yeah, right. Okay. Well,
There are people who think, that as soon as the egg meets the sperm, that is the point of life.
no. I think the point of life is when you're out. But then they, yep, goodbye. But again, we're just speaking our opinions. This is
Honestly,
but
I wasn't even speaking opinions, really. I was just more so saying, like, that's what people think. Of course, other people think, like, as soon as you have a little thing growing in a female stomach.
Well, yeah.
That's the point, right? Like, that's the reason why the debate has almost never ended. Honestly, if anything, I should scratch the word almost out of the vocabulary. That's the reason why abortion has never been agreed on. Because nobody can agree on when life starts versus when it isn't a life. I said what some people think, you said what other people think, and then, there's the other extreme of this skin cell that I peeled off of my skin is a live cell. This sperm that is floating around in the junk, right,
Uh,
is alive. Your blood,
right.
your blood is alive. When people donate blood, is that getting an abortion? Is that wrong to donate blood? Is it wrong to give people your liver if you can't use it anymore? If you're not alive? Like, where is the line? That's what a lot of people have been trying to figure out. Like,
Well, yeah.
ever since Roe v. Wade was even introduced back in the 70s, I want to say?
I don't
I
know.
might be wrong about when it was introduced, but the fact that it was repealed. Oh, and let me take this a little tangent here.
Yeah,
The
well,
the day after that happened, I was watching like a few live streams, right? None of the people that you would know, but some people who were, Canadian, some people who were, you know, from England, some people who were from other places, let's just say. They were all clowning on me. They're like, you guys really took away abortion? That's selfish of you. That's what they were saying. Because he's taking away somebody's right to a happier life in some cases. That's the important part of this. In some cases, the word some for all of this. Some of this, some of that, some of this. But in
well,
some cases, it makes people's lives way better if they can get rid of that reminder. Because, I mean, hate to say this word, right? But rape.
hmm.
Are you saying that a lady who has been raped has to carry out their reminder? Well, now, by law, they do. By law, they can't get an abortion right now in most states. So they'll have to either go to Canada or a different country and, like, have it done there, or they have to give birth to someone who will remind them of their pain.
I don't know. It's like, well, if you think, okay, you don't want it, then say goodbye to it. But
Of course, there is the adoption route, which,
adoption,
let's
which,
be honest, adoption is great. It's a great way to get children into deserving, loving families in most situations. It improves their lives rather than just staying in like an orphanage for the rest of their child life. I think orphanages kick people out as soon as they turn 18 or something. But there is that route. It's a good route for some, but how many people exist in the world who were put up for adoption? And how many people are currently looking to adopt? Not everybody. We're all fine to have a fun time in college, and then once the baby is out, put it to adoption. We're all fine to do that. But if everybody's doing that type of thing, there's going to be a big population of children and a small population of that children who can get a loving home. It's like the prison stuff. It's the prison. It's the prison dilemma too. Because all of the prisons are like at max or maybe even over max capacity, we need either more prisons or to pardon some people or to not arrest people at all. But like, how do you deal with that? Because all of them are filled up. Do we let
Now,
them?
I do think,
Do we let them serve until they pass away naturally, or do we let the ones who sold weed out because weed is now legal? So it's okay. You're fine to do that now, but when you were arrested in the 80s, it wasn't. But like, do you let some people out and some people have to stay? Do you reintroduce the death penalty? That's a big tangent, I know. Um,
I don't know. At the end of the day, like, my thing is, yeah, I think adoption would be better, but I'm also not gonna stop somebody if they want to go. Oh, bye bye.
Cause like it's, I'm just saying, okay, this could sound evil, mean, rude, but I see it in a different light. I would much rather, if I don't want the child, let's, pretend I'm a lady who just gave birth and I'm like, I don't want this guy, right? I would much rather put the thing out of its misery before it's actually able to think, before it's actually able to remember things, experience things. I'd rather take it out of its misery than to have it grow up in with a chance of it being undesired. How badly would you feel if, let's put you in the shoes, right? You physically, Dom, you are the mom. You gave birth, right? You didn't want it, so you put it up to adoption. But then you find out 40 years later that child that you gave up for adoption, because of its terrible card that it was given, became the next Jeffrey Dahmer.
Mm.
You could have stopped that. You could have just said, okay, it's going. I'm not going to give it a chance at life because I can't afford it. I can't love it because maybe it came from a bad situation. Maybe it came from high school, like a high school fling where it's like, huh, I failed health class. Wait a minute. What's this thing growing in Susan's stomach? Oh no. Is this a baby? Like people
Yeah.
don't know this stuff. So they won't be protected. So they have it and they put the rest of their future down the drain essentially. It's big
And
old tangent aside, but like there are
two,
definitely people out there who try to flood our government with religion when the founding fathers were against that from day one.
well, I
For
will.
for legal reasons, none of the abortion, none of the prison, none of the actual political stuff really is the DomJake belief. We are we are just technically employees, kind of the DomJake enterprise who speak this without the DomJake belief.
Uh,
Right? This is just us talking. This is not us, bashing one side or the other with any of it.
yeah. Well, I mean, we've definitely gone on for this part too long. I do want to. We should mention at least one more thing. Is something that happened probably by the time this is uploaded, maybe depending on how long this takes for this to get finished. 4 months ago, but as of this recording, 3 months ago. And that certain event is, let's just say, Trump got his ear, at least, like, get slashed by a bullet.
Mm. There's an attempt at former president's life.
Yep. But the guy missed, went right in Trump's ear.
And of course, things like that will divide a nation. It will divide even foreigners. Foreigners were talking about it. I actually learned about it from watching an Australian news network. I didn't know about it before Australia. Like,
I don't know. Yeah, the kid eventually. I think the kid that tried to shoot him also died.
so
Oh,
that was that was them taking their own life.
yep.
It was, you know, I'm trying to take out, in their mind, I'm trying to take out the villain, but I know by taking out the villain, I will be labeled a villain, so I'm taking myself out too. That's the mindset.
He probably didn't want to deal with the consequences of, being in jail, so he just decided to just end it all.
Which, I mean,
I don't know. I
okay, we have to say this thing right here. Taking somebody's life should not be made in like a joking manner, right?
Yeah,
That's not something to joke about in that type of way.
yeah,
Maybe if the person's okay with it. I mean, Trump seems fine with joking about it now, but just because somebody disagrees with you should not be a reason why you end their life or you try to harm them. Maybe it's not a life ender, but harm them. That is a silly, stupid thing. That, as much as I disagree with most of what he stands for, he should not have had that happen. I think JFK shouldn't have been attempted. I think Abraham Lincoln shouldn't have been attempted. I think Reagan or Bush or nobody should have had this assassination attempt on them.
I don't think anybody, like, nothing should, like, nobody should get their life taken, nor anything is worth taking your own life.
We'll put a pin in the neither is taking your own because sometimes, you know what, I'm putting a pin in that guy. But
Yeah, well, we
it
are, like,
definitely happened and it rattled actually the world. It rattled the world.
yeah.
So, what was your thought whenever you saw that?
Well, I don't know. It's like, part of me is like, okay, it's like another, like the second time somebody tried to shoot him. On the other hand, it's like, oh, like, he was that close to just being dead. And if
And
that,
yeah,
it would not have been good for the country if he was gone. I
and
mean,
and some would disagree with that, but
sure, some would, yeah. I'm
and
not
then
gonna,
some would agree with that, and some would be like, well, I both agree and disagree, right?
it's like, I'm sure, yeah, people are gonna think, oh, the world's over now because he's gone. But then some are gonna think, oh, the world is better now.
The world just begun because he's gone, right? Yeah.
There's, but I mean, it'd be, I don't know. It's always, the perception's always different. It's like, if I knew him super well personally, I would have been devastated. But I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but it's like, I was still shocked when the news happened.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest, I was shocked too, but I would say I was kind of shocked that the security was kind of lacking. Doesn't matter if they are currently a president or not, but you put a president up on a stage and you have it near like a building that you didn't check, you didn't watch, you didn't put anybody up there. You were asking for it. That's what happened there. That was asking for something to happen. So like while I was shocked that that event unfolded, I wasn't shocked at how the event unfolded. Somebody climbed to a high vantage point while the security did not check the perimeter well enough.
Yeah.
Like, that's on the security. Yes, I know the dude's the one who pulled the trigger, but that's on the security. That's not even on the kid at that point. Because guess what? The security has, like, Secret Service has saved countless other presidential assassination attempts.
Yeah,
They
there's.
never got close because they did their job.
Yeah.
Like, if there was no Secret Service, or at least if they weren't on top of their game, like in many different previous instances, we would have a lot more assassinated presidents by this point. But just that group did not do their job. They got compliant or lazy, and they're like, I checked a building yesterday. I don't need to check a building today. Now, speaking of that attempt, I'm going to kind of I'm going to kind of steal something that I had on your section, because for those of you who don't know, I divided these tasks. I did the past stuff, and I had Dom do, more of the modern day stuff. This little brief, I say brief, this little section right here, we're kind of doing this together.
Yeah.
He did the technology stuff, he did the ugh, he did the scandal stuff, and I'm doing, other stuff, right? But I'll take something that you were supposed to do. There is also a conspiracy out there that was staged by Trump. That was staged by the Republican movement, because who isn't going to, you know, look at somebody who survived an assassination attempt as, dang, they'll really live for this nation. Dang, they'll do something great. So, like, there are some people who believe that it was actually the Secret Service member who, like, sliced his ear, right? It wasn't even a bullet that grazed him, is what some people are saying. They took, like, a sound and played an audio sound and had somebody firing something, but it's actually just like the Secret Service guy slicing an ear.
Well, then, but
Conspiracy. I know.
that's just a theory.
A conspiracy theory. Thanks for what? No.
But I don't. It's like people are always gonna say, "Oh, it was just, somebody could have, someone purposely did that."
Well, there's conspiracies about everything. Conspiracy theories that, famous ones. The earth is flat. There are lizard people who are controlling the government and Hollywood.
Mhm.
The Illuminati. There are secret radio messages in, I don't know, TV shows that force every child to come out as gay, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are conspiracy theories that are far-fetched, but there are some theories that are less far-fetched. But, it's to be taken with a grain of salt, really. I mean, do I truly believe that it's staged by someone? I don't, but I could see why people think it, because it's a powerful image. It looks American as hell. You see a former president being shielded by Secret Service, American flag in the background, bleeding for the country. That's American. It's only missing, like, a fucking bald eagle that's breathing fire, right? Like, that's it.
Mhm.
That's American as hell, man. And while I was on vacation, right? South Carolina. I did my Myrtle Beach thing like a month or two ago at this point. That shirt was in a lot of stores. South Carolina being a very conservative state to begin with. but the Trump assassination was on hoodies, it was on towels, it was on bags, it was on shirts, it was on hats. It was everywhere. And people were buying it. Because why would they have all of that stock if people weren't going to buy it? So it's working. Yeah, so that's why I can see why someone would think
Oh,
that
this
it was
was,
staged. It was for the presidential campaign.
yeah, someone could. Regardless, it's like, yeah, it's still shocking, even if it was like a staged event.
Right. Um, so I guess we could take a little moment right here to say that next time we will pick up with, I guess, me talking about some key political speeches and writings.
Right.
Um,
And,
we'll pick up with that. Then we'll get into Dom's research tasks.
right.
More of the modern stuff.
Yeah.
And if there's time at the end, we could do something fun, like talking about different memes or pop culture stuff.
Of course.
But that would be for after.
Yeah.
So
But,
I mean, just like taste trades, this will be 2 seconds for you and probably a week for us.
yep. Well,
Oh
eh,
yeah.
but anyway, yep, this is going to probably be like a 3 hour episode.
It has potential of being there.
Yep. Hopefully, just the next time we don't spend too much on tangents. But
But tangents are fun sometimes. It's like
they are. But
tangents can add to a conversation. But you know what? Before we go on a tangent about tangents, we'll see you in part 2.
see you soon.
Something that I think would kind of be a little bit of a benefit for us to actually get into. Not saying that a certain assassination attempt, or even many assassination attempts throughout history, haven't been influential, but I feel like it's kind of worth visiting key political speeches and writings a little bit, if you wouldn't mind anyway.
Okay, let's dive right in.
And I know my part's been going on for a long time, so I'll at least try to give the spark notes of these writings, right?
Yep.
Without further ado, let's move on to political key writings and speeches that have kind of been a pivotal moment throughout, you know, history. One of the most influential works is John Locke's The Treatise of Government, or the Treatises, or whatever, where Locke argued for natural rights and the idea that government exists to serve the people. This was foundational for modern democratic thought. Now, if you remember, John Locke was one of the people I mentioned before, with, his mindset kind of helped shape democracy into what it is today, or at least what it was, up to a certain point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, we did kind of, go over a lot of him, but he wrote down a lot of ideas, which became something.
Woohoo!
Woo, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
just like just like anything that's written down, it can always get read by somebody, and who knows? Maybe your idea is the next government out there, people listening, right?
Yep. That's right, guys.
Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, there is a little bit of a paper written about, well, communism. Let's just say it's called the Communist Manifesto. It is by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Now, this text laid the groundwork for communist ideology, arguing that history is defined by class struggle and that the proletariat or the working class, would eventually overthrow the capitalist system. I think it's worth noting and worth restating from earlier that system was meant as an economic thing, not as a form of government, but of course, people reading this idea, it gets passed down eventually to the point where, oh, clearly this is for government, right?
Yeah,
Wrong.
so it's kind of like the telephone game.
Yeah, kind of to the point of someone wrote something down, somebody else is trying to understand it.
Yeah. So the Federalist paper is written by, at least correct me if I'm wrong, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay.
Correct, and correct. All right, there we go. These essays argued in favor of the ratification of the U.S. Constitution that laid out key principles of American federalism and the balance of powers.
All right.
Let's kind of get into a little bit more of a modern speech instead now. We're talking about speeches now. For a more recent history, Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech is a pivotal piece of political oratory delivered during the Civil Rights Movement. It called for an end to racial inequality and remains one of the most iconic, if not the most, advocating for social justice.
Right, yep, I do remember learning about that in 8th grade, as well as you.
And the interesting thing about that, the famous part was all improvised. That was the second half of the speech. Like, for the first half, he was just doing, like, he was looking at his papers, saying some stuff. But then after a while, he was like, you know what? I'm going to say what needs to be said. And he says it. He says it.
So this really, I think this was around the time when, different, I guess, people of color were not allowed to be near the whites.
Oh, God, segregation. Yeah, it was during the Civil Rights Movement in the 60s, definitely.
So, and then this is the speech that, even to this day, is like the most iconic.
It is either the most or one of the most iconic speeches that exist, at least in a modern history. Definitely, yeah.
Yep. And, I mean, depending on when you're listening to this, either 20 years from now, but, yep, 60 years plus years have passed. Of course, there could be more iconic speeches that we may dive into later on.
And another classic is Winston Churchill's We Shall Fight on the Beaches. That's the speech during World War II. Churchill's words inspired the British people during their darkest hours, giving them hope and resolve against Nazi Germany. Now, of course, Winston Churchill is not American, but who's to say that, you know, great political speeches can't be said throughout the world? Nobody said the United States are the only speech givers, right?
Hey, we could have like the folks down under who could be great speech givers.
Right. They probably could be.
Mm-hmm.
Except I think that every Australian, I could be wrong, but like most Australians think of their president or prime minister is, and I'm using their words, a wank.
Mm.
Like I don't
People,
even think it. I don't think it even matters what side you're on. I just think everyone thinks they're a wank.
I guess people can then say our president is a wank, right?
That's the thing, though. Not everybody thinks that here. That's a different thing. It's like, regardless of what side, pretty much everyone does. Whatever. Doesn't matter. We're going on a tangent that we don't really need to. Alright. You also have The Social Contract by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Rousseau, I also was talking about earlier, which introduced the idea that governments deserve their authority from the consent of the governed, a key idea that influenced the French Revolution. And then there's a letter from Birmingham jail. Who wrote that? Martin
Uh,
Luther King Jr. went to jail for his civil disobedience, for standing up for what he believed on.
for what?
He marched the Capitol so then, people can get equality,
So he
essentially.
went to jail just for essentially stating his what perspective?
For pretty much participating in the First Amendment, he went to jail because it was kind of at the time, you were a lesser person. What are you doing? You can't do that. We're not going to listen to you anyway. That type of thing. He did
So
nothing wrong. Neither did anyone else in that movement. But they still got hosed down by, fire hoses. They got, you know, beaten by batons, smacked on the head with some bricks. They were punished for standing up for themselves and trying to advocate for a better future.
mm, I see. Well, or just for existing too.
Just for existing, right? They wanted a chance for people to all vote, all have the rights, all be able to, attend a library, all be able to go to the prestigious schools, to work with science, to work with children, to work with, you know, anything that wasn't just a run of the mill, labor inducing job, right?
Yeah.
Heck, running for office, for a political position. That wasn't a thing until, like, relatively, in terms of human history, recently. But
But
he went
we
to
know.
jail. He went to jail for all of that because he was essentially labeled as, like, the ringleader, right? He was one of the faces of this movement because he got all of the support and all of the attention on TV. So he went to jail for, like, I forget what the official reason was, but, like, essentially for, like, inciting riots, even though all he was doing was marching down a street, which you're allowed to do, and other people were doing sit-ins. Like, there was one of the most famous ones was, like, at a Woolworths. They were just sitting in while a lot of, like, the white people were just yelling at them, and all they were doing was sitting. They weren't even drinking. They weren't destroying the seat. They weren't doodling on the table in front of them. Just sitting. Sitting in silence with all of this other stuff behind them. Because there was also a mindset back then where if they did speak up, if they did fight back, well, that's them in jail forever. So they did not do a thing in most situations. They just walked or they sat down and that's it.
All I can say is things now are different.
For the most part, of course, you see in some situations that is not the case, right? That no change happened in certain areas in this country. However, actually, rather, so as you can see, these writings and speeches didn't just reflect the political climate of their time, they shaped future movements and ideologies. They're still referenced today when discussing democracy, revolution, and social justice. And honestly, there are even a few other ones. Like, I didn't even get into the Gettysburg Address, the Declaration of Independence, and the Magna Carta. I mean, we could dive into them a little bit, which they're definitely important. They are definitely important pieces.
Gettysburg Address. That was like way before Luther King
Well,
thing.
well, sure, that's part of what moving on to a next, say, A next bullet point means, Dom.
Mhm.
That was me moving on.
Okay, moving on.
So let's kind of rapid fire these next three because I've definitely spent a long time here yapping, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Magna Carta was signed in 1215, was a foundational document in English history. It established the principle that the king was not above the law, that the revolution whoops was not above the law, which was revolutionary at the time. It is often considered the cornerstone of modern constitutional law, inspiring future legal systems to emphasize individual rights and checks on power, especially the idea of due process. It was a significant step forward, limiting the power of the monarchy and paved the way for parliamentary systems. Many of the rights we take for granted today can trace their roots back to this document. Now, the Declaration of Independence was written primarily by Thomas Jefferson in 1776. This document was the American colony's formal statement of independence from Great Britain and laid out the philosophical justifications for breaking away from British rule. And its opening lines are legendary. Do you remember them off the top of your head?
I can definitely say I don't remember
We
everything
hold
from.
these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Jefferson drew heavily from the Enlightenment ideas, particularly from John Locke. Remember that guy? We mentioned him before. To argue that people have the right to overthrow the government that fails to protect their fundamental rights. I will repeat it again, like I did before, that people have the right to overthrow the government that fails to protect their fundamental rights.
Yep, the government is not your friend. So, that's what it sounds like.
Well, they are your enemy until they're your friend, right? You're able to overthrow them, you're able to riot, you're able to change the system if you have the people, if you have the power, if you try. It works. It's a thing that worked in France. It's a thing that worked in the United States back in the past. But France, like modern France, is doing that stuff. Like modern France is rioting in the streets. And then their political people, the people in charge, then change their stuff to try to get them to stop rioting. Because of the O games that happened in Paris, the people were literally putting poop and garbage and stuff in their river because they were standing up for the idea of, okay, now you suddenly want to clean up our city? It's for a big event. You don't want to clean up our city unless if it's gonna have the world looking at it. Gee, that feels great to us citizens that are just here all the time. What if you weren't gonna have the O games here? What then? Would we just have dirty water the whole time? Sounds like it. So they revolted, and they literally shat in the river.
Wow, what a shitty situation, right?
Oh. Well,
Well,
it wasn't just a declaration of war, it was a statement of ideals. These words have echoed throughout history, inspiring movements for independence, democracy, and human rights around the world. Lastly, we'll cover the Gettysburg Address, delivered by which former president?
Abraham Lincoln himself? No, I might be
Lincoln is
wrong.
correct. There you go. I thought you were looking it up. So I'm glad you didn't know it. Well, I guess actually for this episode, I'm disappointed you didn't know it.
Mm,
It was delivered by Abraham Lincoln in 1863 during the American Civil War. In just 272 words, Lincoln redefined the purpose of the war and the meaning of American democracy. He famously said, "Government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." Now, it's incredible how much Lincoln conveyed in such a short speech. The Gettysburg Address wasn't just about honoring the soldiers who died in battle. It was about recommitting the nation to the principles of equality and democracy laid out in the Declaration of Independence. Lincoln reminded Americans that the war wasn't just about preserving the Union, but about fulfilling the promise of liberty and equality for all. It's one of the most powerful speeches in American history and still resonates today. Now, all of these speeches, all of these papers, all of them played a critical role in shaping political thought and democratic ideals, or communist ideals for, you know, for the marks out there. But they continue to inspire movements for justice and equality to this day. Now, the next part of this episode will be all about Dom and the more modern stuff. Now,
Oh boy, now the
let's
spotlight is on to me.
let's give you a moment to warm up your voice and
Here, let me go.
me. Are you warmed up? Cause you're gonna need it, bro.
Okay, well, I'm just gonna start off by stating the definition of a democracy.
Sure.
So, a democracy is a system of government in which state power is vested in the people or the general population of a state. So, pretty much under a minimalist definition of a democracy, rulers are elected through competitive elections, while more expansive definitions link democracy into guarantees of civil liberties and human rights to competitive elections. Yeah. Now, we're going to talk about, I guess, hold on here. Democracies have definitely evolved and developed a, more electoral things. So, about electoral democracy here, I guess, yeah, electoral democracy is a type of democracy where representatives are elected by the public. So, this is now talking about mainly here in the West, for those who are not on the East side. Nearly all Western style democracies function as some type of representative democracy. Here's an example from like the United Kingdom, Germany, and France. And, of course, us, literally, the United States.
Germany with Merkel and France with Macron.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, 'cause you researched the modern people, right?
There's definitely a lot of modern people to choose from here. We've had a lot of presidents during these quote-unquote modern times, such as 50 years ago we've had Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, Bill Clinton, and I'm not gonna even say the rest. It's a whole expansive list.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about how the democratic institution varying from countries. We're going to talk about the one in France. Of course, the politics in France take place within the framework of a semi-presidential system determined by the French Constitution of the French Fifth Republic. The nation declares itself to be a quote unquote indivisible, secular, democratic, and social republic.
Okay, so what
The
does that mean?
indivisible, it just means incapable of undergoing division. That's exactly what it means. It's in the name.
In terms of political, so yeah.
Secular just means worldly rather than spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
So just
Otherwise,
all
it would have been sacred.
talk, no action, right? That right, Mr. Trump? All right. Yep, democracy, as you know, is political. It's a system, a decision making within an institution, organization, or state which members have a share of power. Modern democracies are characterized by two capabilities of their citizens that differentiate them fundamentally from earlier forms of government: to intervene in society and have their sovereign held accountable to the international laws of other governments of their kind. Democratic government is commonly juxtaposed with oligarchic and monarchic systems, which are ruled by a minority and a sole monarch, respectively. Democracy is generally associated with the efforts of the ancient Greeks, whom 18th century intellectuals considered the founders of Western civilization. These individuals attempted to leverage these early democratic experiments into a new template for most monarchical political organization. The extent to which these 18th century democratic revivalists succeeded in turning the democratic ideals of an ancient Greeks to the dominant political institution of the next 300 years is hardly debatable, even if the moral justifications they often employed might be. Nevertheless, the critical historical juncture catalyzed by the resurrection of democratic ideals and institutions fundamentally transformed the ensuing centuries and has dominated the international landscape since the dismantling of the final vestige of the empire following the end of the Second World War. Modern representative democracies attempt to bridge the gap between Rousseau's uh, depiction of the state of nature and Hobbes' depiction of society as an inevitably authoritarian through social contracts that ensure the rights to the citizens, curtail the power of the state, and grant agency through the right to vote.
Right on. Do you possibly have anything about any, I don't know, absolute monarchies?
Absolutely, I suppose, right?
Oh, or maybe how the absolute monarchies kind of shifted to constitutional,
I do have a source here that talks about.
like Britain, Sweden, maybe the Japanese.
I do have a source that's talking about. I do have something. I just gotta. It's constitutional monarchy. So essentially, monarchy of the United Kingdom, right? So the monarchy of the United Kingdom, commonly referred to as British monarchy, is a form of government used by the United Kingdom by which a hereditary monarch reigns as the head of state, with their powers regulated by the British Constitution. BC, right? Not British Columbia. The term may also refer to the role of the royal family within the UK's broader political structure. And as you guys know, as of, September 2022, we have King Charles III, who replaced Queen Elizabeth, right?
I believe so, yeah.
Because she was the Queen of England for a very, very, very long time.
Very.
She was,
But what I'm kind of hearing from this is that absolute monarchies back in the day, let's use Britain as an example, but it used to be like the king was kind of the absolute ruler. They decided everything. Or the queen, whoever was the highest,
like,
decided everything. And
so like
then
with,
we've kind of gotten to a point now with the constitutional monarchies where, sure, the royals are still something. They are important, but they are not the end all be all. It is constitutional now.
everything's, I guess it's kind of like how, I don't know, like here in the West or United States, yeah, we have like different presidents and then there's like different movements, I suppose, right? We can dive into what exactly constitutional monarchy is. It's a form of monarchy in which monarch exercises their authority in accordance with the Constitution and is not alone in making decisions. Constitutional monarchies differ from absolute monarchies, in which a monarch is only a decision maker, and that they are bound to exercise powers and authorities within limits prescribed by an established legal framework. Constitutional monarchies range from countries such as Liechtenstein, Monaco, Morocco, Jordan, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Bhutan,
Great.
where the Constitution grants substantial discretionary powers to the sovereign, to countries such as the United Kingdom and other Commonwealth realms, the Netherlands, Spain, Belgium, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Malaysia, Thailand, Cambodia, and Japan, where the monarch retains significantly less, if any, personal discretion in the exercises of their authority. On the surface level, this distinction may be hard to establish, with numerous liberal democracies restraining monarchic power in practice rather than written law. For example, the Constitution of the United Kingdom, which affords the monarchs substantial, if limited, legislative and executive powers. Yep, so this isn't just something that, is in one country. For any
Yeah.
foreign viewers listening, I apologize if I cannot pronounce your country.
Or me at that point, because the Lesotho.
For any viewers from there, please do not attack us.
Hey, if anything, we want to see Morotho you.
Yeah. But, yep, there's a lot to that.
Yeah, it really sounds like the pivotal, I guess, feature is the ruling class is not made up of, the king, the royal family, I don't know,
Not
sultan.
just them.
Now it's kind of mostly with the people with a little bit of say from the ruling royals. At least with, some of them. Other countries that, used to have that absolute monarchy probably have something else in place where it's like more democratic, but maybe the people who have the royal blood in them are still like worshipped as like, oh, that's interesting. You are a member of the royal family. So much for that. We live in a democracy.
That's right, guys.
Oh god, that must suck to be like the great 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 grandchild of like the sultan or like the king or the, I don't know, emperor, and just not have any power anymore. It's like, yes, if we still had monarchy, I would be the king. But dang, we don't.
Hmm.
That must suck.
I don't know. It's like, hey, you want power? Well, no, you probably don't.
Too late.
And the next bullet point I do have is something called nationalism.
Right on.
And I got the definition for nationalism. It is an idea or movement that holds that the nation should be congruent with the state. So, as a movement, it presupposes the existence and tends to promote the interests of a particular nation.
As if I was five.
Self-governing.
That's the simplified version.
Yes.
That makes me understand it more.
Okay.
You were only trying to say hard things into other hard things. I needed easy things from hard things. My brain was exploding there.
Okay. We're not talking about 18th century here.
It's just the basis that, or the belief that your own country is better than all others.
So it's like
That
it's
is
kind of
nationalism.
people are just, oh yeah, so essentially you're just saying like, oh, we're better than you.
It
If
is
we
for the two of us anyway, if we were both nationalists, it would be America first, we are the greatest, everyone else can suck it, is the idea.
It's like, yeah, suck it, France. You guys are even rude to begin with. We deserve our freedom fries.
Okay.
Nationalism, it really shaped a bit of our country.
How
Have you
so?
heard of... No. Let's start off talking about how it was in the 19th century. The political development of nationalism and the push for popular sovereignty culminated with the ethnic/national revolutions of Europe. During the 19th century, nationalism became one of the most significant political and social forces in history. It was typically listed among the top causes of World War One
Mm,
because one country couldn't keep their mouth shut. Essentially, it's like, yep, we think we're better. Europe, greatest continent ever.
it's just egos that are inflated by other egos.
Except back then, they weren't calling it egos. But yeah,
I don't know.
Napoleon's conquests of the German and Italian states around 1800 and 1806 played a major role in stimulating nationalism and the demands for national unity. These are the words of the English historian J.P.T. Barry argues, or Barry, J.P.T. Barry. He argues between 1830 and 1870, nationalism had thus made great strides. It inspired great literature, quickened scholarship, and nurtured heroes. It had shown its power to both to unify and to divide. It had led to great achievements of political construction and consolidation in Germany and Italy, but it was more clear than ever to threat to the Ottoman and Habsburg empires, which were essentially multinational European culture that had been no multinational European culture had been enriched by the new vernacular contributions of little known or forgotten peoples, but at the same time, such unity as it had was imperiled by fragmentation. Moreover, the antagonisms fostered by nationalism had made not only for wars, insurrections, and local hatreds. They had accentuated or created a new spiritual divisions in nominally Christian Europe.
Hmm.
And this was like Europe here. Now, France. Nationalism gained early expressions in France's revolutionary government. So in 1793, the government declared a mass conscription with a call to a service. Oh boy, and I think this kind of goes back to the French Revolution, which you mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
This nationalism gained pace after the French Revolution came to a close. Defeat in war, with a loss in territory, was a powerful force in nationalism. In France, revenge and return of Alsace-Lorraine was a powerful motivating force for a quarter century after their defeat by Germany in 1871. After 1895, French nationalists focused on Dreyfus, and internal subversion, and the Alsace issue petered out. Now, my next point here is something that does involve Nazi Germany,
Ooh.
and this thing is called totalitarianism,
Close enough.
in which is a political system and a form of government that prohibits opposition political parties, disregards and outlaws the political claims of individual and group opposition to the state, and controls the public sphere and the private sphere of society.
Or in other words,
Essentially, it's like, oh, you don't agree with me.
if you disagree with me, then you are not going to be put in a position of power.
Mm-hmm. In a field of political science, totalitarianism, God, is is the extreme form of authoritarianism.
Oh my god.
Authoritarianism. where the where, where in all socio-political powers held by a dictator, which you may know Hitler to be, who also controls the national politics and the peoples of the nation with continual propaganda campaigns that are broadcast by state-controlled and by friendly private mass communications media, which you've probably seen Hitler in his speeches.
Oh my God. Like, I was considering putting some Hitler speeches on the influential, because okay, I have to say this. Yes, you can disagree with somebody's beliefs, and you can also say that they were great at speeches and they were great at, you know, public speaking and writing and all of this stuff. Before he rose to power, he was actually like an artist. Like, he painted a lot and he was like kind of like a street performer too. So that's kind of an interesting thing to kind of note, that a lot of his speeches were because he knew how to like public speak and he knew how to like kind of act and put on a show. Even if you don't understand anything that he says, like you might not even just speak any amount of German, his speeches, they sound like they're great. They
They
sound like they're, you know, well put speech. Now, granted, maybe if I understood the language, maybe I'd be like, oh, that's kind of bad.
mm,
But
of course
he's a
from the
speaker. He definitely was.
you may it's like you may not agree and you're allowed to disagree, but of course he may be good at speeches.
Right? It's
Again,
not mutually exclusive.
right. Yep. He was like at least the more well known to-
Uh huh.
totalitarian.
Totalitarian. Yep, yep, yep.
Let's also not forget Joseph Stalin, who's the leader of the Soviet Union. These two guys are literally the kind of the epitome of totalitarianism. The totalitarian government uses ideology to control most aspects of human life, such as the political economy of the country, the system of education, the arts, the sciences, and the private life morality of the citizens. In the exercise of socio-political power, the difference between the totalitarian regime of government and the authoritarian regime of government is one of degree, whereas totalitarianism features a charismatic dictator and a fixed worldview. Authoritarianism only features a dictator who holds power for the sake of holding power. Hmm, this doesn't even just relate to government. People like power, and is supported either jointly or individually by a military or by the socio-economic elites who are the ruling class of the country. Yep, and whether this relates to government or not, some people like holding power, such as the government.
Like that idea kind of sounds like the playground. Like, I am the ruler of, I don't know, the sandbox. No, only me. I am the sandbox guy. You cannot be the sandbox guy because I am the sandbox guy. That sounds like a childish way to rule a nation, honestly.
They're like, yeah, they're like grown-up kids.
But, like, if it works for your country, sure, it works for your country.
But
But just on an
morally,
outside looking in, it just sounds like, unless if I'm misunderstanding it, it's definitely possible because I'm not living in that situation, but it seems like I'm walking by a kid that is just not letting other kids into the ball pit, you know? Like,
yeah, I don't know. It's like we're only looking at this from, the outside perspective. It's
Let's be honest, from the lens of modern America, really, because we've never even visited other countries before to really get an idea. And who's to say that if we were to visit, maybe tourists don't get the treatment as real people who live there, you know? Maybe that's
yeah.
also a difference.
Mm-hmm. But I just think morally it's crazy.
It's interesting at the very least, you know?
But I guess in their rules, fine. But this does kind of, I guess, totalitarianism does sound familiar to fascism, right?
In a way, yeah.
It's like a far right authoritarian, ultra nationalist political ideology and movement, characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a national social hierarchy, God, subordination of individual interests for the perceived good of the nation or race, and a strong regimentation of society and the economy. Yep, these are essentially kind of what totalitarianism is. It's like, oh, let's just say nobody can enter my house. This is only my house. No one's allowed in here, only me. I guess we could say the same thing, yeah. Fascism, though, rose to prominence in the early 20th century Europe. The first fascist movements emerged in Italy during World War One before spreading to other European countries, most notably Germany, just like we talked about earlier. Guy, I'm sure, just based on how he sounds, his speeches might be great, but if you actually translate it, it's bad. Fascism also had adherents outside of Europe. Fascists saw World War One as a revolution that brought massive changes to the nature of war, society, state, and technology. The advent of total war and the mass mobilization of society erased the distinction between civilians and combatants. A military citizenship arose in which all citizens were involved with the military of some manner. The war resulted in the rise of a powerful state capable of mobilizing millions of people to serve on the front lines, providing logistics to support them, having unprecedented authority to intervene with the lives of citizens. Hmm.
So, kind of, I want to ask you a little bit of a thinker here. Do you think, based off of the past, let's call it maybe the past 8 years, do you think America has underwent anything that kind of resembles somewhat any of these? Yes,
Hmm.
although we still lived, even back then, back then, as if 8 years wasn't a short time ago. But even though it was labeled a, democracy, did it at all feel like someone was trying to be the only person in power?
I think I do remember 8 years ago there was there were two people debating, right?
I'm talking about the one of the people who went in, who made it in, not was debating, no, who found their way in. I'm
Hmm.
insinuating Trump here.
Him.
Like part of his thinking was he wanted to try to ensure that only he was in power, pretty much.
Hmm. Oh, the
He had a lot in common with Putin. He had a lot in common with Kim Jong Il.
not to mention a wall he was planning to
Well,
build, right?
that's that's neither here nor there. That's just another border, essentially. That's just another fence. That's a different thing. I'm more so talking about his ideal. he
right?
his ideal is essentially to get rid of democracy and have him be the only one in power. That is what he wants. He does not give a shit about letting other people share the ball pit.
Right.
Or if he does have to let people into the ball pit, he's only gonna let certain people in, not others. That's what I'm kind of insinuating. Like, it's if you looked at like a lot of the speeches, not even just speeches, but like tweets too, like you would kind of, if you look at it in a certain light, you can definitely see that even though we're in a democracy at that time, it kind of feels like we're not. It kind of felt like we were leaning towards, oh, we're kind of, it's kind of like we're in Germany now.
Hmm. I suppose so. But let's fast forward to 8 years. Wonder what's gonna happen.
Yeah,
We'll see.
the modern stuff that if at least at the point of us, let's see, recording and posting this, we don't know who the next in line is going to be.
We'll
The
actually
the
we'll
the
actually know.
the two people, at least looking at the D's and the R's, the two front runners, I guess is the term, would be both Kamala Harris on the Democratic side because Joe Biden dropped out, and I think I think her vice is Walls, right? I think it's Walls.
And yep, and then
And then
Republican.
Republican, you want to take Republican side
And he was also a former president. He's Donald Trump.
with the vice of.
I don't know if Mike Pence is back.
I want to say it is. I really think I've seen both of them on the same sign again. Unless if
Hmm.
people were reusing their old signs, maybe that's the thing. I don't know. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we have the front runners. If we're only looking at the presidents, we have Harris and we have Trump.
But hey, you know what? Whether this gets uploaded around the time or after that time, in less than a month, we'll know who's going to be the next president.
So right now, the two of us have no clue what's going on.
Nope. We have no idea.
I mean, we know relatively who's running. We don't absolutely know every Green Party, every third party, but like, you know, some of the Green Party, or I mean, some of the third parties, they got a lot of good stuff cooking up. Will they make it onto the presidency? Maybe not,
Yeah, maybe.
but there's a
Just,
chance. There's always a chance.
we gotta find out.
Or so we've been told. There's always a chance anyway. And
Right.
it's not out of the question. Technically, if everybody wrote the name of just somebody in, we could write somebody in. We could all write, I don't know, Bruce Willis into office
I
if we all
suppose.
wanted to.
Now,
Carry
yeah,
on.
now we're gonna talk about next bullet point. It's not colonization, but it's the opposite of colonization.
Opposite of the colon of liverization?
That's right. No,
Dang.
okay. Does anyone know what decolonization is?
What the colonization is. I thought you said it's the opposite.
It's decolonization.
Yeah, option D. I was picking D. Colonization. Bad joke. Continue.
I know. Well, it is the undoing of colonialism, the latter being the process whereby imperial nations establish and dominate foreign territories. Often overseas, the meanings and applications of the term are disputed. Some scholars of decolonization focus especially on independence movements in the colonies and the collapse of global colonial empires. Now, the reason why we're talking about this definition is because we're going to be talking about decolonization post World War II. Now, this one specifically, we're talking about Western colonization. In the first post-war years, there were some prospects that, except in the case of the Indian subcontinent, decolonization might come gradually and on terms favorable to the continued world power positions of the Western European colonial nations. After the French defeat in the Dien Bien Pho, Vietnam, in 1954, in the abortive Anglo-French sorry French people, expedition of 1956. However, decolonization took on an irresistible momentum so by the mid 1970s only scattered vestiges of Europe's colonial territories remained. The reasons for this accelerated decolonization were threefold. First, the two post-war superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, preferred to exert their might by indirect means of penetration, ideological, economic, and military,
Giggity.
often supplanting previous colonial rulers. Both the United States and Soviet Union took up positions opposed to colonialism. Second, the mass revolutionary movements of the colonial world fought colonial wars that were expensive and bloody. Third, the war. The war-weary public of Western Europe eventually refused any further sacrifices to remain overseas colonies. In general, those colonies that offered neither concentrated resources nor strategic advantages and that harbored no European settlers won easy separation from their overlords. Armed struggle against colonialism centered in a few areas which marked the milestones of the history of post-war decolonization. Right. Yep, there was definitely some. Back then they didn't use the word beef, but there were definitely moments where they were just not like.
They were bickering. They were quarreling. They were in a spat. You know, a little bit of a tizzy here. That's what they had.
Yeah. Yep, decolonization. When it comes to really anything, too much of a good thing, it can be bad. And here's a study, as of this recording, half a decade old. So, of course, if there's any current studies, let us know. But there's a 2019 study found that democracy levels increased sharply as colonies gained internal autonomy in the period immediately before their independence. However, conflict, revenue growth, and economic growth did not systematically differ before and after independence. According to political theorist Kevin Dong, decolonization may have been the century's greatest act of disenfranchisement, as numerous anti-colonial activists primarily pursued universal suffrage within empires rather than independence. As dependent territories became nation-states, they lost their voice in metropolitan assemblies, whose affairs affected them after long independence. Yep. Again, it's not. Some things may be a good thing, but it may not always be a good thing.
The good old rule of life. Sometimes a great thing is great, and sometimes that great thing is bad. And sometimes that bad thing is great, sometimes that bad thing is bad.
Yeah. Right.
The good, the bad, the ugly, the...
I probably deafened you. Now you are deaf. Next bullet point, which was something that you talked about earlier with Martin Luther King.
A slight bit, though. I mean, I didn't get super in. Okay, I got a little bit of a tangent in, but I'm sure you could probably say more things, right?
And this was known as the Civil Rights Movement, right? And this went from 1954 to 1968. It's a good old 14-year run. This does relate to what you said. The Civil Rights Movement, which was a social movement and campaign from 1954 to 1968 in the United States to abolish legalized racial segregation, discrimination, and disenfranchisement in the country. The movement had its origins in the Reconstruction era during the late 19th century and had its modern roots in the 1940s. After years of direct actions, and grassroots protests, the movement made its largest legislative gains in the 1960s. The social movement's major nonviolent resistance and civil disobedience campaigns eventually secured new protections in federal law for the civil rights of all Americans. The social movement span of time is called the Civil Rights Era. So, yep, no colors being separated, if that makes any sense.
No colors separate. Are you talking about their goal or
I think the goal. I think I was trying to say what their end goal.
the end goal? Because I'm like, definitely at the time it was the opposite, but like
But they were trying to
they were
fight
they
against,
were fighting for it. They were trying to unite. Okay, yeah.
So please don't get mad at me for
The
saying it the wrong way.
the wording was just kind of a little,
A little juicy, right?
just a little off the wording. Anyway,
But that's, I guess, in the Cliff Notes way, they were trying to, unite people together, whether you were white or black. Remember the whole Rosa Parks thing?
of course I do.
That was a thing back then, too.
She parks herself in the Rosa in the front, or was it in the back? No, it was the front.
Yep, that was the point in time when, she refused to give up her seat because you know why.
Because she was there first. You wouldn't give up your seat if you weren't the one sitting there first.
And yeah, and there's people like that today who, let's say, they want, it's like, hey, I was on this airplane seat first. Like, I'm sat here first. I am not giving up my seat to go to Tokyo.
Well, there is a little bit of a difference when it comes to like planes. You kind of gave like a bad example with that because it is your ticket. It says where you are seated. A public bus is just sit pretty much where you can. But back then, the public bus system was sit in your designated area, but other than that, doesn't really matter, you know? So, it's not the
Yeah,
same as I was sitting in this plain spot first.
guess so. But yeah, no. But the famous one was Rosa Parks.
Mm.
Yep, rest in peace for her because she passed away 19 years ago.
Oh, 19 years. Even more recent than I thought.
She was in her early 90s.
Nice.
She lived a long life. Yeah. But the movement really did make an imprint in history.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now we have global political organizations. Like the biggest example being, United Nations and European Union.
Mm.
If I'm correct, the United Nations takes place in New York, even though this is a place for all countries. We've learned this, kids. Put your listening ears on.
What's this now?
The United Nations.
North Atlantic Treaty Organization, right?
It is a diplomatic and political international organization with the intended purpose of maintaining international peace and security. developing friendly relations among nations, achieving international cooperation, and serving as a center for coordinating the actions of member nations. So it's, you know how we have United States, all states are together, but this is a way, to kind of bring all countries together to speak.
Yeah, it's basically like a big conference hall that's like it basically has like a seat for like every ruler of every nation that's in the UN anyway. And I think there's also like a spot in the back for like the press. But like you're not like allowed to like record video, but like you're allowed to like I think like take notes or something if you're a reporter. But yeah, it's a wild spot there. And honestly, it's like this isn't me wishing anything, obviously, but it's one of
Mm-hmm.
those things where it's like with all of that power in one area, stuff can happen there. And I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
But maybe it could be because like UN meetings are held everywhere. So like I don't know if it's the same spot every single time. Maybe that'd be worth looking up. Huh.
Yeah. And let's just say maybe there was video recording, but it's not going to be released to the public. It's only just for them.
Yeah,
Right?
probably just a way to like archive the speeches or whatnot or the decisions.
Yeah. So, I mean, we do have United Nations, right? And isn't there something similar in Europe, which is called the European Union, right?
EU, the EU, gross smell, the smelly European Union, the EU.
Yeah. But in this case, the EU is European Union, which is a supranational political and economic union of 27 member states that are located primarily in Europe. So it's pretty much, I guess, their version of United Nations, but most of the stuff's in just like Europe. The Union has a total area. Okay, come on now. I don't have to get into the specific numbers, but there's a lot of people there. Over
Mm,
449 million. I just essentially think of it as like the European version of United Nations. But then again, United Nations brings everybody together.
well, a lot. Not everybody, because there are definitely leaders who just do not want to be affiliated.
I guess so.
But definitely a lot. Most of the countries.
So I guess it's like a condensed version, but it's like stuff in European countries.
Correct me if I'm
Hmm.
wrong, though. I think the European countries are also a part of the UN too. So it's probably like the UN is to decide different worldly matters, but then the EU is just like a way to decide the European matters, you know?
It's pretty much what it seems like.
Uh,
Like it's seems very I really think it, and it's definitely made it really a big influence on like political decision making in the long run. It's really, yep, definitely gives people to speak all sides, not just one party being like, your idea sucks, ours is the best. I wouldn't say it's like fascism, but think of it as like a large community center, but for everybody.
I could see that, yeah.
I think it's good to have include everybody, not just, disregard everyone else because they're different.
Yeah, it's always great to kind of hear like the perspective from everyone, but at the same
Mm-hmm.
time, it's you also kind of have to think the UN, and I would also think the EU would all be kind of formed by the same type of people. They're all people who hold like high status, right? I would almost kind
Yeah.
of think like, what would the UN look like if it was like middle class, poor people, and then like the rich people altogether. Like, what would
Hmm.
that look like? Would would rich people be able to kind of agree with some of the poor people? Because they're all kind
But
of high status there. Like
but
they're all presidents, they're all chancellors, they're all, you
I
know,
think it
leaders.
I think it really varies from perspective. I mean, I'm sure there's rich people that would try to help people who are poor, but then there's those that are just like, I made it in life.
Yeah, because your father gave you everything, right?
That's probably
Nepotism.
that's how probably some of them got their way, right? Instead of, hey, there's rich people that started off poor and they didn't just they actually worked to where they got, right?
Mm.
So then they would those are the types of people that would probably try to help poor people, but also not try to, cheat their
But
way
they
up.
also don't want to lose their pedestal though. It's like,
Yeah.
yes, they might be rich now. They might be a president now, but they started from like nothing, but they don't want to lose their everything, you know? Like,
Hmm.
so they probably won't like donate everything that they ever earned, right? Like,
Mm. Yeah. But when it comes to those people too, like the presidents and any political figures, they also got their campaign strategies.
mm,
And right here, I've found 10 essential strategies for successful political campaigns.
right.
Now, one of the first one being early planning and team assembly. So I guess build a community around you, have like have them help spread the word of you, whether that's, I guess going up to people's houses and being like, "Oh, could you vote for Senate Tom Pickles?"
Right
I
on.
don't.
Hey, Rugrats grew up way more.
Yep.
They're even older now. They are 50.
Even more grown up, right?
Decrepit. Rugrats decrepit.
Uh, but
Hey,
yeah, but
hey, Granny Lil, tell me about your sibling Will. I
oh,
don't know.
Dill Pickles. Oh, Tommy Pickles. He he was always a great kid, but he's always wanted to be positive, and he built a community of friends that helped spread the word of, oh.
Too bad that good heart gave him a heart attack at age 55.
But hey,
Uh,
he really helped. At least he became president by, hey, going to people's houses and saying, hey, vote for me because I can fix things. Now, second strategy is understanding the political landscape. So I guess don't be, closed minded. Focus on voter relevant issues and influential community leaders. So I suppose, don't underestimate your opponent, I suppose, right?
right.
Because they can bite like tigers. Now, third one, competitor analysis and strategy development. Analyze opponents to guide messaging and highlight strengths. Yep. Think about how you're gonna deliver your words. Whatever message you have, think about how you're gonna tell people, whether you mean it or not, of course. Okay. This one. Developing a clear and relatable campaign message. I guess I wouldn't call this manipulation, but create a convincing, memorable message and slogan. I mean, tell people what they want to hear, but also have to hear.
Free restrooms available. That's the
Yep,
slogan of the year, right?
sure, yeah. Hey, have have the state of Maine have free restrooms.
Free restrooms everywhere. And then you'll see it chanting in the streets of America. Free restrooms everywhere. Free restrooms everywhere. Come on.
I would love to see people having little signs being like free restrooms everywhere.
That'd be
Well,
awesome.
and yeah. And the next one is something that's probably been used within the past 10 years. Effective use of digital tools and social media. How many times have you seen any political ads on your, like, whether that's social media like Snapchat or Facebook? Or just, what if you were just on Nick.com and you see an ad for whatever president?
Nick doesn't
And
have that, do they?
I don't know. I don't really. I'm just giving an example.
They would have fallen downhill if they did that.
I I don't know, but they've done like, if anything, they've probably just done like mock election, like kids, oh vote,
They did something
right?
with Kid President,
That it. If anything, that was the closest thing, but there was never
but it was never
no like
like a
secret messages.
right. It was just a friendly little kid who was just in a tux talking about like positive things.
That's literally what it
It's
was.
literally who he was. We even saw a lot of his stuff in like some of my classes too.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's like, oh, it's positive, but it's also kind of like a president. So I guess
I guess.
listen to this kid, I guess.
Hey, what if this guy does become the next president in like 20 years?
As long as he retains his kindness, I would not mind.
If he can lower gas prices and fast food prices, I can thank him.
Oh, okay, gas is one thing, but fast food, really? Really?
I don't
You
know.
need that to be cheaper, really? It's,
I don't.
how about
It's
make the groceries cheaper?
definitely make groceries
So
cheaper
then
because
we could have
that's more of a necessity than fast food. Let's be real.
healthier options be cheaper.
Let's just because I'd rather pay for like tomatoes and cucumbers than always constantly getting a fried chicken from Popeyes every day. But it's there if you don't want to cook at home. But okay. Also, of course, while following the same thing, digital tools. I think I ranted about this a couple like videos ago, but I was talking about political calls.
You even said it in this episode.
I know, and I'm kind of going back on it. Like I said, even though I said bad things about it as being like a waste of time, because this is to put myself in their shoes. This is their way of getting their message out to people to vote. Right. So I know I said those things, but putting myself in whoever's running their shoes. Okay, next one. Field organizing and voter contact. Direct voter engagement through volunteers and community canvassing. Yep, so it's like, communities. It kind of repeats what the next thing says, which is building community support and visibility. Engage in local events and maximize public speaking opportunities. Yep. So, like I've said, go out, speak to people, have maybe, if you want your word out, stop at people's houses. And if they're not interested, just move on to the next person's house. I mean, it's the one way to, at least that's one more thing you're doing. One close thing to running. Next one, handling misinformation and negative campaigning. Prepare for and respond to misinformation with clear messaging. And I could say this message goes for anyone, whether you're like us, who are on YouTube, or you're a Hollywood celebrity. You're always going to have people that don't like you.
And it sucks to think about. So don't.
Yeah. So you can either get the last laugh, which maybe you want to be positive, so maybe don't get the last laugh.
Oh, don't get the last laugh.
Or just maybe say your side and then go about your day. Next one, get out the vote myth strategies. Intensify voter engagement efforts as election day approaches. Yep. So in other words, go into their house and have them vote. No, but
Force them to write your name on that line.
tell them you will not leave their house unless they agree to vote. No, but
Tell them you will not leave their house unless if they sign on this line. But then you peel away the label, and it's actually a vote for them. Meanwhile, they thought it was gonna be, I don't know, a restraining order that you signed, but little did you know, you voted for them. Uh-oh.
hey, you don't have to read it because I already done did it. Now sign.
Right here?
Yep,
In
right there.
in
Right.
but
Uh-huh.
but
Yep.
this says right here that it
I
no
already read it.
but no but
Uh,
I'm reading it now though, um
uh, uh,
but, but it says
Hold on.
but no but it says right here
Empty your mind and sign it.
it but it says right here
Uh, just sign it anyways. Who
I don't
cares?
I don't want to give my first child to you.
Uh,
I
uh,
don't want
uh,
to do that.
hey, it's in the best interest of your child. Now sign it. No,
You
but
know what?
no, you.
I'll have another. Fine. I'll sign it. My name is Reginald the Third.
Uh,
REGJIJNUJNLD.
okay, that's okay.
Number three.
Okay, thank you. Kind regards, Tom Pickles.
Little did they know, now that they're gone, my name is not Reginald the Third, so I
Well,
just you committed fraud.
okay, well,
Carry
time to
on,
call the
carry on,
cops.
carry on.
But but no. The bottom line is, if you're running, whether it's your state representative or you're somebody's biggest president, you're not. Let's be honest. I have another 11 more years till I'm old enough to be president.
35. We should make it. We should change it. Maybe you're allowed to be president when you're 5. Think about
Yeah.
that.
Well,
Free cookies for
not
everyone? Are you kidding?
not kid
And
president. It's
guess what?
Pampers president. But regardless, whether you're just a state representative or someone like president, spreading the word is a great way to be known. Whether that's, spamming ads on someone's social media or calling them on the telephone to newspapers from your local newspaper source. Just spreading the word out there will help. And I think that's just about all my bullet points that I have. Now, before we do conclude this episode, I will repeat this again, like we said in the beginning of this episode. Do not take this as us trying to persuade your views and opinions.
Mm-hmm.
This was, once again, an education, like a history lesson, essentially. Just trying to give all sides an opportunity.
Yes, and it is worth kind of mentioning on that subject. It is worth saying that because we said different things does not mean we stand 100% with those ideals. It's just a way to say what people believe in.
Mm-hmm.
Because there are people out there who would not listen to anything unless if it's their own ideals, and we don't want that. I mean, there's no progress unless if some form of unity is found, you know? We have to
Yeah.
listen to everybody's opinion. Because the smart answer is gonna involve all of their opinions.
Yeah. So it's like, you can agree or you can disagree, but there's the saying that we've heard all our lives: respect their opinions.
Respect, reflect, and respond. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. But like he said, yeah, some solutions may form by other people's mixed opinions.
Of course. Like that's if any if we're even gonna say this, like other topics too. That's the same sort of thing with everything. Like
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't have found the best way to, I don't know, dispose of plastics if not for many different people kind of trying to come together and to, you know, evolve different ideas, change them up, or do parallel thinking, but like pivot a little bit. Ideas are there to be shared with, and ideas will not be made unless if there's some sort of difference in the world. You have to
Yeah,
compromise, you have to pivot, you have to hear everything so then you could have a good idea, right? Like,
you have to you gotta listen to the other side sometimes.
and like,
Yeah,
yes, I'm not saying you need to, never listen to the stuff that. This isn't to say that you can't listen to your
no,
side. You can,
no,
but don't only listen to it. Think about
that's
everyone
what
else.
that's what the point also is. Yeah,
And if you're only listening to, let's say, one news source, that's not enough. Maybe venture into the other news channel every now and then.
like listen to different, listen to different sources. They may have very similar to very different viewpoints.
Hey, if we're the only, I guess
Mm,
technically after uploading this, we could technically say this. If we're the only political podcast you've listened to, then you know what? Maybe try a political podcast from someone who isn't like 21, 22, 23.
mm,
Maybe listen to a 50-year-old
mm,
lady talking about it?
yeah, or yeah, like listen to a podcast dedicated to political stuff. Doesn't have to be people like us in our early 20s.
Because, I mean, the two of us definitely have different ideas from maybe other people out there, and it's worth listening to every single one.
Yeah.
Now, of course, you're gonna find some people who will say the opposite. You will find people who are like, no, only listen to people like me.
Yep. Yep. I mean, sure, they might. One could also argue that, oh, they've been around the block much longer, so they know everything. I mean, it depends on what it is.
They don't
You
know how
may
to change their contact information. They don't know how to send an email to one person. They don't know how to put a picture onto an email.
they probably still use fax machines, right? Hmm.
This old
Yeah, they're still doing
fancy schmancy ticky-tacky thing.
old-fashioned letter sending through the mail. Hey, you can still do that, guys. Right, 80-year-olds listening to us?
Hey, we'll hear from them in 3 years.
Yeah. Yep.
Wouldn't that be wild if we actually got big enough to the point where we're actually getting 80-year-olds to send us letters?
Hey, that would be interesting.
Hey, in 3 years, if we make something out of this, if you are, if you or someone you know is an 80-year-old lady, have them write to us, and if we have like a PO box set up, have them send it to it.
Hey, I'll put something maybe in the description. No, we don't even have a PO box yet. So please do not send us anything. And please don't send it to our addresses.
People will probably find them.
Mm. Oh boy. But
Uh,
anyways, yeah. But I will say I was a little bit I was pretty rusty in the beginning of my research, but towards the end, it really, I guess, got de-rusted, right?
A little bit. You kind of opened up a little bit, right?
I opened up more towards the end, but my God, in the beginning, it was bad. But I'd say this was one of the very unique episodes we recorded
It's
in a long time.
yeah. It has legs of being something. Obviously, like we're doing this as like a timely episode, right? So like the people, at least in this nation, the people who are listening to this could be listening because it's like they want everything as soon as they can, right? This
Yeah.
is timely. Um, and at this time, we have no idea what's gonna happen.
Not yet, at least.
We are right there with everyone. So we've gone through the basics of political ideologies and some of the most influential political writings, civil rights movements, speeches, and we've also talked about a little bit of some conspiracy sort of stuff. A lot of stuff. From the foundations
Yep.
of government to where it is today. Actually, before we conclude, not even just this year, but what do you think government's gonna look like, let's say, in 100 years?
Hmm. Either there's gonna be, um, either we're gonna have younger people running it, or let's be honest, maybe people born like 20 years from now will be part of the government, and they're by then it's going to be their dino democracy.
Uh, uh,
People, because in 100 years from now, people in 2045 will be 80.
that is an awesome little, I don't want to say callback because it's not exactly public, but like, that's a great little reference you gave me there. I liked it.
But
But
but I really think either I hopefully by then we'll have younger people
hopefully Biden.
in there. I just I I don't know. Hopefully by then, but then again, probably 100 years from now, we're not going to be around, but maybe our podcast and other content will.
Hey, you
For
don't
the
know that. We could be the first people who are 176.
hey, technology and like in the medical area will probably be better by then.
We will be able to change our heart into a, solar powered thing where as long as we have our hand in the sun, then our heart will still pump. So we could live as long as the sun does.
Maybe.
So we will be 9,000 years old before we die, right? If
Right.
only, right? But I kind of,
If
I
only.
kind of think the future, like 100 years from now, it's either going to be no different,
Maybe.
because I mean, it could be the same, pretty much. It has the
Maybe.
ability to be, but honestly, there's part of me that thinks there's going to be like a president of Mars, or like it's going to be divided up into like that, because we
Oh,
kind of
let's.
have the ability to like kind of inhabit Mars. In 100 years, I think we would be able to do it because we're already starting to like think of sending people up there to do that. You know, so
We're already at the point where we're starting to overpopulate.
so I'm almost thinking like we, at least in our lifetime, might start seeing like the start of like a Mars colony.
Yeah.
So maybe if there's enough people up there or out there, however you want to say it, because Mars isn't exactly on Earth.
Yeah.
But if there's enough people on there, they're gonna need somebody to kind of look after them. Unless if
Yeah.
Mars is anarchy, which maybe it is. I don't
Maybe.
know.
Huh.
Because you kind of think about it this way, right? We divide up our earthly continents and lands. So America is here, but Mars is a different place. Is there going to be an American Mars area, or is it just going to be a different country altogether that happens to have a lot of people born in America? I don't
Well,
know.
there's only one way to find out.
So I think space politics. I think that's
Hmm.
going to be in 100 years.
Probably. Who
But
knows?
regardless, each of these ideologies and works have shaped the way that we all think about government and society today, whether it's the foundations of liberal democracy or the rallying cries of the revolutionary movements. They've all left a mark. Now, I guess in our next episode, because we kind of already have a thing in our mind in our
Actually,
in our next episode, you know what? I'll rephrase it. Thank you for watching this episode of the DJ podcast, the DomJake podcast, rather. It was definitely a interesting kind of idea, and I'm glad you took this journey with me.
hmm, it's I could say it's quite a rocky journey, but it was good.
It was definitely one of the first times in a while that we had to dust off our research spectacles, right?
Man, takes God reminds me of my high school days, right? Because some things I will sometimes not take out to present, but then I don't know.
Well, regardless, let's take a moment right now to remind you that honestly, this is a long enough episode. We don't need to waffle on with this stuff. So
And
we'll
yeah,
just
like
we'll
yep.
just leave you with this. If you're inclined to do all the YouTube stuff, thank you for doing that. Have a great day, everyone.
See you in the next episode.
Whatever that will be.
All right.